Okay, hello, good morning. Hopefully you had the time to settle down. Whiteboard यही है ना? इसे use करना. Okay, in the last class, what were we doing? हाँ, इंडिया पाकिस्तान में कहाँ तक पहुँचे थे? हाँ. So basically that has been the flow. We started with some basic framework of international relations. उसका कोई science नहीं है. In order to make sense of the discipline, we try to create a framework. What happens in foreign policy, how countries interact, how the interaction is interest based. Second thing that we tried to do was try to make sense of the subject matter in terms of syllabus and in terms of focus of India's foreign policy. So we started with the neighborhood. We developed an understanding of the neighborhood, and then we looked at some policy frameworks which would basically clearly tell us that neighborhood is important for India's foreign policy, no matter which government is there. Alright, so as a matter of foreign policy, what consistently is the focus area? And then after that, we looked at Gujarat Doctrine or neighborhood first approaches. These are approaches in terms of how we define our relations with the neighbors from our side. And then we looked at India's relations bilaterally. So we started with Pakistan. So 70 years of relations have traversed. Generally, the paper is not about history, it is about looking at the patterns. So we covered the 70 years of relations through a framework wherein we said that it is a challenging relationship. It's a foreign policy challenge for us. It's a difficult relationship. And when we see this relationship from a time-based perspective, we find that the pattern has been of what? A cyclical pattern in which there has been either some form of dialogue between India and Pakistan, but those periods of dialogues or agreements have been affected by or disrupted by violence, terrorism or wars. Now if you are reading any book, you will find the same story, that this has been the pattern. And then we said that looking at Pakistan, what we are looking at is a country with which India seeks normalization. India seeks peace. But that has not been possible. So here is a neighbor or here is a country which continues to harm India's interest. That is our primary concern. We want to change the behavior of that particular country. So in that scenario, we try to understand that, and we will remember this. आप अगर क्लास मटेरियल पढ़ रहे हैं उसमें भी है, जनरली आप कोई भी हिस्ट्री पढ़ेंगे उसमें भी. There are certain key milestones. One milestone is 1972 Simla Agreement. Simla Agreement. So what basically happened in Simla Agreement is something that you should keep in mind. So by Simla Agreement, India established the principle of bilateralism. Alright, so before Simla Agreement, what had happened in 1947? On the issue of Pakistan's aggression in Jammu and Kashmir, India went to the United Nations. And in the United Nations, given the power politics of the day, given the involvement of United States or United Kingdom, the issue became about a dispute between India and Pakistan on Jammu and Kashmir. This is not how India wanted it. India wanted UN to call out Pakistan for its aggression. It did not happen. So after that, we were very clear, 1950s, 1960s, India was very clear that it does not want the role of any third party in issues related with Pakistan. So the opportunity that India got was 1971 when Pakistan was defeated. So when we signed our own agreement with our own negotiations with Pakistan, the Simla Agreement of 1972, it was basically an opportunity for India to establish bilateralism. So since then we say that in issues pertaining to Pakistan, Pakistan से जो भी जुड़ा हुआ मुद्दा है, there is no role for any third party or external actor. This is what I mean by bilateralism. That since 1972 consistently, India cites the Simla Agreement as the basis for resolution of issues between India and Pakistan. What is that formula? It is going to be peaceful bilateral negotiations. That is what India says. Right? Secondly, you would see from the Simla Agreement came out the line of control. All right, line of control. So 1947, because we are now moving towards the next issue of Jammu and Kashmir. There is a lot of history there. Much of it you study in post-independence India, right? So we are going to look at the second issue, which is Jammu and Kashmir. So 1947, what had happened in the case of Jammu and Kashmir? The formula for independence was contained in India Independence Act, which basically also talked about partition. All right, so two sovereign entities, India and Pakistan, were created. Power was transferred by the Britishers to them. Now, there were many princely states. So princely states were given the option of either joining India or joining Pakistan or remaining independent. So Jammu and Kashmir also for the longest time chose to remain independent. But then by October it was clear that Jammu and Kashmir cannot remain independent. Pakistan supported tribal invaders started making advances in Jammu and Kashmir. The ruler of Jammu and Kashmir asked for India's assistance, है ना? इतनी कहानी तो आपको भी पता होगी. The ruler of Jammu and Kashmir asked for India's assistance. Now, India then sought to formalize the relationship with Jammu and Kashmir. In what ways? There was cultural and historical basis to it, but formally India then advised the ruler of Jammu and Kashmir that unless Jammu and Kashmir accedes to India, sending military would be untenable. Why? Because we would be sending military to another territory. So when Jammu and Kashmir acceded to India, instrument of accession was signed with effect from October 1947 by the ruler of Jammu and Kashmir, Maharaj Hari Singh. Jammu and Kashmir by law became an integral part of Indian Union. So that cemented India's position on Jammu and Kashmir, India's relation with Jammu and Kashmir as we know it today. So signing of instrument of accession became the basis of Jammu and Kashmir becoming an integral part of Indian Union, number one. Number two, now the question was that of Pakistan's aggression. Pakistan had sent certain fighters and had backed them up. So India launched a military initiative to stop the advance of those Pakistan-backed fighters. And B, then India sought the help of the UN in calling out the aggression of Pakistan. What India wanted was that UN should clearly call out the aggression of Pakistan. That did not happen. All right. But the issue then was at the UN. So with the help of the UN, in 1949, India and Pakistan enter into a ceasefire agreement. All right, ceasefire agreement. In simple terms, they stop firing at each other, they stop fighting. This ceasefire agreement leads to a line called the ceasefire line. All right, the ceasefire line. Now, the ceasefire line separated Indian troops from Pakistani troops in the territory of Jammu and Kashmir. All right, so it basically demarked or marked the division of territory between India and Pakistan. Some parts of Jammu and Kashmir were controlled by Pakistan and large part of Jammu and Kashmir was under India's physical control. Right, so that is what had happened. So 1949 to 1972, this was the case. 1972, out of Simla agreement, understanding developed during the negotiations, we convert this ceasefire line into line of control. All right, line of control. By and large, the same line with some minor adjustments. But now this line came out of negotiations between India and Pakistan. This line was not a line supposed by or proposed by United Nations. So this is a bilateral instrument that India and Pakistan created in 1972. Ceasefire line was a line based on the UN mediated ceasefire. Line of control comes out of Simla agreement, which is a bilaterally negotiated agreement. All right, that is something that we should understand. So that is what India always wanted. Right? That is what India wanted, that now we don't want the interference of any third party into the issues which are related with Pakistan. ऐसा हम 1972 से लगातार कर रहे हैं. और आज भी हमारी यही पोजीशन है, राइट? So now when we look at the issue of Jammu and Kashmir, how should we place it in relations between India and Pakistan? There are few things that you would come across always. First of all, sometimes you would hear that there is no role of Pakistan in the issue of Jammu and Kashmir. That is what India's position is. Sometimes you would hear that some of the issues are bilateral. There is no role of any third party. So what does it mean? It simply means that there has been an attempt to achieve peace with Pakistan, and in that course, some issues pertaining to Jammu and Kashmir, India has been willing to discuss with Pakistan. All right, so that is very clear. Some issues India has been willing to discuss with Pakistan, depending on the time and context. All right, but there have been times in which any negotiation with Pakistan has not been possible, has not been considered to be the right course of action. So on those occasions, India asserts its basic position, which is Jammu and Kashmir is an integral part of the Indian Union. And if there has to be any negotiation with Pakistan, that has to be only about those parts of Jammu and Kashmir which are under the illegal occupation of Pakistan. तो हम दो चीजें कहते हैं, कुछ मौकों पे हम तैयार रहे हैं बातचीत करने के लिए, इंक्लूडिंग ऑन द इशू ऑफ जम्मू एंड कश्मीर. कुछ मौकों पे जब बातचीत पॉसिबल नहीं है या देर आर टेंशंस इन रिलेशंस, वी हैव रिपीटेड आवर बेसिक पोजीशन कि जम्मू एंड कश्मीर इज एन इंटीग्रल पार्ट ऑफ इंडिया, एंड इफ एट ऑल देर इज एनी कॉन्वर्सेशन ऑन जम्मू एंड कश्मीर, इट इज अबाउट those parts of territories which are illegally controlled by Pakistan. So what would happen is you would read a lot, you may create confusion, but from the perspective of the examination, you have to remember as basic position, India's basic position. If you look at today, if there is any proposal as to India and Pakistan coming to negotiating table, India would always say that we are ready for it, but India would have a condition. What condition would India have? Cessation of terrorism. Cessation of terrorism. India would say, first let's talk about terrorism. If terrorism is resolved, then we can make progress on all the other issues. That is what India would say. Number one issue for India is terrorism. But similarly, if you ask someone from Pakistan, what is the number one issue for you? They would say, we must talk about Jammu and Kashmir. So clearly in your mind, differentiate between the priorities of India and Pakistan, and you are writing the examination for Indian civil service examination. All right. So here is an issue on which ideally there would not be a question in the examination, but here is an issue on which there would be a lot of interest, and you basically would have an inclination to resolve this issue. So don't worry, you are not being asked to resolve this issue, you are only being asked to present the correct position. So if you would like to start writing, pens to the paper, please start writing. Please start writing. For India, Jammu and Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir is an integral part of the Indian Union. Jammu and Kashmir is the integral part of the Indian Union. Apart from historical and cultural factors, the signing of instrument of accession, by the then ruler of the princely state of Jammu and Kashmir in 1947, the signing of instrument of accession by the then ruler of the princely state of Jammu and Kashmir in 1947. The signing of instrument of accession by the then ruler of the princely state of Jammu and Kashmir in 1947 has cemented this position, has legally cemented this position, On the other hand, Pakistan considers the issue to be, Pakistan considers the issue to be an unfulfilled. Pakistan considers the issue to be an unfulfilled agenda of partition. The issue to be an unfulfilled agenda of partition. Initially, Pakistan tried to capture the territory, by supporting invaders in 1947, and also intervening militarily, by supporting invaders in 1947 and also intervening militarily. Having failed to fulfill its motive through traditional wars, Pakistan has supported insurgency and cross-border terrorism in the region, since the late 1980s. Having failed to capture the territory through traditional wars, Pakistan has supported insurgency and cross-border terrorism in the region since late 1980s. Pakistan has also sought to internationalize the issue. By raising it at forums such as the United Nations. Pakistan has also sought to internationalize the issue by raising it at forums such as the United Nations and the OIC. Forums such as the United Nations and the OIC. However, these attempts by Pakistan have produced diminishing returns. These attempts by Pakistan have produced diminishing returns. Over the years, most of the international community has supported India's position and concerns. Over the years, most of the international community has supported India's position and concern. In 2019, when changes were made in the administrative status of Jammu and Kashmir, in 2019, when changes were made in the administrative status of Jammu and Kashmir, Pakistan opposed the move, and sought to create an international opinion against it. However, this attempt also gained limited support from few countries like China. However, this attempt also gained limited support from few countries like China, Malaysia and Turkey. Most of the international community, including countries like France, Russia, United States, and UAE, accepted India's position on the matter being an internal issue or domestic issue, right? Given Pakistan's consistent attempts at fomenting trouble, or internationalizing the issue, India has clearly defined its position as follows. India has clearly defined its position as follows. A. India has clearly defined its position as follows. A. Jammu and Kashmir is an integral part of the Indian Union. Jammu and Kashmir is an integral part of the Indian Union. B. Any issue pertaining to Jammu and Kashmir, is a matter of domestic policy, 3 or C, any matter pertaining to Jammu and Kashmir is a matter of domestic policy. C, there is no role for any third party intervention. There is no role for any third party intervention on the issue. And D, issues to be taken up with Pakistan on the matter, are limited to those parts of the territory of Jammu and Kashmir, illegally occupied by Pakistan. The above mentioned position has been the cornerstone of India's policy. The above mentioned position has been the cornerstone of India's policy. The above mentioned position has been the cornerstone of India's policy as conveyed through the Parliamentary Resolution of 1994, as conveyed through the Parliamentary Resolution of 1994, and also reiterated in 2019. So basically this whole write-up is simply about understanding and keeping in mind what India's position is. There can be a lot of facts, factoids, a lot of knowledge which is available outside, but for the examination, just remember one thing: you are writing an examination for a government job. So first and foremost, you should be clear about what is the position of the government or governments and what has been India's consistent position on the matter. That's it. In interview situation or in the mains examination situation, try to play safe on these kinds of matters by stating the position which has been repeated by Parliament. तो Parliament में जो बात हो गई, एक बार 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 हो गई, वो बात आपको रिपीट करने में कोई परेशानी नहीं होनी चाहिए, क्योंकि इफ यू ट्राई एंड बिकम एन एक्सपर्ट ऑन इश्यूज लाइक दीज, इट वुड टेक लाइफ टाइम. सो मेंस लिखते हुए या इंटरव्यू देते हुए तक आप एक्सपर्ट नहीं बन पाएंगे. सो जहां पे स्लिपरी स्लोप है वहां पे कंसिस्टेंट पोजीशन जो भी है गवर्नमेंट की वो होल्ड करना इज एडवाइजेबल. एंड देन बियॉन्ड दैट इफ यू डोंट नो, जस्ट से अ सिंपल सॉरी. ऑलराइट, इन द इंटरव्यू सॉरी के भी नंबर होते हैं. सॉरी और थैंक यू बोलना भी अगर आपको ढंग से आ जाए तो आप इंटरव्यू अच्छे से हैंडल कर सकते हैं, है ना. सो दैट इज व्हाट द पर्पस ऑफ दिस होल एक्सरसाइज वाज. इज देयर एनी क्वेश्चन? किसी को लिखने में तकलीफ हुई पीछे से? हाँ बताइए, व्हाट इज योर क्वेश्चन? मुझे सुनने में थोड़ी तकलीफ हो रही है. हाँ बोलिए. इंडिया हैज अ बाउंड्री विद अफगानिस्तान. यस यस. Can we? This dimension. See, मैं वही कह रहा हूं कि इसको जितना कम कॉम्प्लिकेट करेंगे उतना अच्छा होगा. So, for factual understanding, just remember, if there is a question whether India shares a boundary with Afghanistan or not, the answer is yes. We share our smallest land boundary with Afghanistan. That is true. Now, it is factually also true that some parts of Jammu and Kashmir are not physically administered or controlled by India. It is understood by everyone. All right. And the boundary with Afghanistan also remains part of that occupied territory. So thereby we mentioned, as if you would remember, as the position of India, one point is that if at all there is any matter of discussion with Pakistan, it is about what? It is about those parts of Jammu and Kashmir which are illegally occupied by Pakistan. All right. Beyond that, what other dimension do you have in mind? आप मुझे गाइड करें. What other dimension do you have in mind? आपने कुछ पढ़ा हो तो मैं भी कुछ जवाब दे पाऊं. Otherwise, in this statement, the concern is covered, and we are not talking about Afghanistan. आप अगर आपको अभी भी समझ में नहीं आया, क्लियर नहीं हुआ कि मैं क्या कहना चाह रहा हूं, तो आपके पास फिर से मौका है, आप एक स्पेसिफिक सवाल पूछ लें डिमेंशन कवर करने के अलावा. इंडिया का स्टैंड यही है ना. आप इंडिया का स्टैंड अगर पूछ रहे हैं तो ये 4 पॉइंट इंडिया के स्टैंड है, यही मैं आपको कह रहा हूं. ये ब्रॉडली सब कन्वे कर रहा है. मैं वही कह रहा हूं, जितना स्पेसिफिक्स में जाना जाएंगे उतनी मुश्किल में आते जाएंगे. यानी कि स्टेटमेंट का एक पॉइंट है ना जो कह रहा है कि भाई अगर बात करनी है पाकिस्तान के साथ तो उस बारे में बात करनी है. जो जमीन उनके कब्जे में है वो कैसा कब्जा है? इलीगल कब्जा है ना. ये बात कन्वेड है उस पॉइंट के अंदर. अगर मौका मिले ओपन करने की बात हो तो आप कैसे करेंगे कि भाई जम्मू एंड कश्मीर क्यों इंपॉर्टेंट है ना. तो जम्मू एंड कश्मीर क्यों इंपॉर्टेंट है, जब तक आपसे कोई सीधे ये सवाल नहीं पूछता है उससे पहले तो आप वैसे ही उसको ट्रीट करेंगे ना जैसे भारत के और राज्यों को करेंगे, है ना. कि इंटरनेशनल बॉर्डर है, उसका कुछ हिस्सा पाकिस्तान द्वारा ऑक्यूपाइड है, उस बॉर्डर का एक इंपॉर्टेंट हिस्सा हमको अफगानिस्तान से भी जोड़ता है, इसलिए जम्मू एंड कश्मीर के वो हिस्से जो पाकिस्तान के कब्जे में वो हमारे लिए इंपॉर्टेंट है. यही कहना चाहते हैं आप? कह सकते हैं, लेकिन अभी जो हमने स्टेटमेंट किया वो क्या किया? इंडिया के पर्सपेक्टिव से, इंडिया की पॉलिसी पर्सपेक्टिव से. क्योंकि हमको ये भी तो बचना है कि भाई हम जब कहते हैं कि ये इशू जो है हम किसी तीसरे से या पाकिस्तान से हम बात नहीं करेंगे तो उसको हम कैसे जस्टिफाई करते हैं? उसको हम जस्टिफाई ऐसे ही कर सकते हैं कि हम ब्रॉडली 3-4 पॉइंट्स में इंडिया की पोजीशन बता दें और पाकिस्तान ने क्या किया है और उसके रिस्पॉन्स में हम क्या कर रहे हैं वो हमने बताया. अच्छा, दो तीन चीजें और हुई है। अगर आप अखबार, अब आपकी जिम्मेदारी है अखबार पढ़ने की। आपने बेसिक नोट्स लिख लिया, साथ में आप ऐड करते रह सकते हैं जब आप अखबार पढ़ रहे हो। तो इन रीसेंट ईयर्स व्हाट हैज हैपेंड, 2019, on this particular issue, on the issue of changes made in the status of Jammu and Kashmir within 370, Pakistan withdrew its high commissioner from India, और इंडिया के हाई कमिश्नर को एक्सपेल कर दिया उन्होंने, है ना, इस मुद्दे के ऊपर। एक तो ये हुआ। तो भी हमने क्या पोजीशन अख्तियार की, यही 4 पॉइंट हम कहते हैं। पार्लियामेंट के अंदर डॉक्टर जयशंकर का जवाब आप देख लें, या किसी भी जो गवर्नमेंट फंक्शनरी का जवाब देख लें, इन्हीं पॉइंट्स में आता है ना। मेन इशू ये, मेन बेसिकली फोकस ये है कि सरकारें कैसे जवाब देती हैं, ये आप थोड़ा सा समझ ले। उसके अलावा हमने क्या किया, अब हाईएस्ट पॉलिसी स्टेटमेंट के नीचे हमने पर्टिकुलर क्या चीजें की। सो यू वुड फाइंड दैट इन रीसेंट टाइम्स व्हाट हैज हैपेंड, इंडिया मेट्रोलॉजिकल डिपार्टमेंट हैज स्टार्टेड इशूइंग वेदर बुलेटिन फॉर Pakistan occupied Kashmir plus the areas called Gilgit Baltistan, which are generally also is part of what is called Pakistan occupied Kashmir. So weather bulletin has been issued by Indian Meteorological Department, right? Prime Minister has mentioned Gilgit Baltistan in his 15th August speech from the Red Fort, है ना। रेड फोर्ट में जब इंडिपेंडेंस डे स्पीच दे रहे हैं प्राइम मिनिस्टर, तो उन्होंने गिलगिट बाल्टिस्तान के बारे में बात करना शुरू किया है ना। तो ये चीजें हम क्यों कर रहे हैं, ये दिखाने के लिए कि हमारा क्लेम अभी भी उन टेरिटरीज पे है जो टेरिटरीज पाकिस्तान कंट्रोल करता है या ऑक्यूपाई करता है। तो इसका मतलब ये है कि हम सीधे अगर उस टेरिटरी को नहीं ले पा रहे, तो हम लगातार एट द हाईएस्ट पॉलिसी लेवल वी विल clear our position, clarify our position as much as possible, और उसके अलावा at different policy levels we'll take such steps which basically would keep alive our claims. So that's why IMD issuing weather bulletin for Pakistan occupied Kashmir, Gilgit Baltistan is one such measure, or Prime Minister mentioning the people of Gilgit Baltistan is another such measure, or when something like Pakistan trying to convert Gilgit Baltistan into its 5th province happens. When Pakistan starts conducting elections or changing the status of Gilgit Baltistan, what do? We basically issue a statement opposing it, that Pakistan has no locus standi to do so, right? It is illegal. तो ये हम तीनों चारों चीजें करते हैं, है ना। जब हम अफगानिस्तान में जाएंगे, जब हम अफगानिस्तान के साथ रिलेशंस को समझने की कोशिश करेंगे, तो वहां पे हम जो आपका कंसर्न है वो ले करके आएंगे कि कैसे an unstable Afghanistan may have a spillover effect in the territory of Jammu and Kashmir. ऑलराइट, ये केवल जो है ब्रॉडेस्ट पॉलिसी स्टेटमेंट है आपको मुश्किल से बचाने के लिए, इसको रिपीट करने में ना हिचकिचाएं। और जो स्पेसिफिक आपकी जानकारी है pertaining to Afghanistan or any other area, you can add it as an example, ऑलराइट, और एज एन एडेड पॉइंट, ठीक है, वो आप कर सकते हैं, आप गलत तो कर नहीं रहे। और कोई सवाल? So your question is why countries try to internationalize border issues in international forums. Which kinds of countries do that? Their border issues? तो चाइना का एग्जाम्पल आप जब लेके आ रहे हैं, तो कहां पे इंटरनेशनलाइज किया हुआ है? नहीं, अभी अब जापान से फिर अरुणाचल प्रदेश आ गए। हाउ, कि यही मैं आपसे पूछ रहा हूं। अखबार पढ़ना चाहिए, लेकिन अखबार में जो लिखा है वो पढ़ना चाहिए, अपने मन से चीजें ऐड नहीं करनी चाहिए उसमें। कैसे? हाउ इज चाइना ट्राइंग टू इंटरनेशनल? तो पहला सवाल आपका, आपने बिल्कुल सही जवाब दिया कि चाइना और पाकिस्तान जैसे देश जो है इंटरनेशनलाइज करने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं। आगे बताइए मुझे, कैसे हुआ, कहां पे हुआ, चाइना ने कैसे इंटरनेशनलाइज करने की कोशिश की? नहीं, हंसने की बात नहीं है, सोचिए। चाइना सपोर्ट्स पाकिस्तान पोजीशन इन यूएन, समझ गया मैं आपकी बात। चलिए मैं आपके सवाल का जवाब दे देता हूं। सो फर्स्ट थिंग दैट वी लर्न्ड इन दिस लेक्चर वाज दैट इट इज ऑल अबाउट नेशनल इंटरेस्ट। part composition of the national interest is either security related matter, so that security would also involve territorial integrity, territorial security, right? Or it is about status, or it is about economic prosperity. ठीक है, सब national interest के बारे में हो रहा है. So if you have national interest, other countries also have national interests. So either you would have convergence, कि आपके पास कोई झगड़ा नहीं है, आपके पास समान आपके गोल हैं, तो क्या होगा? Cooperation, right? So here clearly is a matter where there is no convergence, there is divergence. So then if you have divergent goals, how do you achieve it? What are the tools available to you? Diplomatic tools, military tools, economic tools. So a military way of securing your territory or snatching a territory from anyone else would be by waging wars. There have been a lot of wars, all right? But sometimes it is untenable that you control territory after the war. You may invade, but controlling the territory is a different matter altogether. So war से solution नहीं हुआ, तो आपने दूसरा तरीका क्या लगाया? डिप्लोमेटिक तरीका लगाया. अगर आपने वॉर से टेरिटरी जीत भी ली, तो भी उसका एक इंटरनेशनल रिकॉग्निशन तो होना चाहिए. तो या तो आपने मिलिट्री तरीका लगाया, आप सक्सेसफुल हो गए. अगर आप मिलिट्री तरीके से सक्सेसफुल नहीं हो रहे हैं, तो फिर आप क्या करेंगे? और भी तरीके लगाएंगे ना, diplomatic economic. So it is one of the options available to countries which they, depending on the context, try and exercise. अब depending on the context क्या है? In your calculation, what is the most effective and least costly method? War is costly, पर जब आप इस मुद्दे को इंटरनेशनल फोरम्स पे उठाते रहते हैं, तो कम से कम आप एक तो अपनी पोजीशन को जिंदा रख रहे हैं, यू आर कीपिंग योर पोजीशन अलाइव, and you are also then creating difficulty for the position or credibility of claims of the other party. So it is all part of different dimensions of policy. What you cannot do through military means, you try to do through diplomatic means. Now let's take the example of Pakistan and China. See, India would not like to internationalize these issues because we are not permanent member of the Security Council. We raising this issue would only open it up for debate, and then other countries, we would provide other countries an opportunity to give their opinion on this issue. So in our calculation, that is not beneficial for us. हमारे calculation में हमारे लिए beneficial नहीं है. But in the calculation of Pakistan, it may be beneficial. है ना? It gives Pakistan an opportunity to strike at India's interests, criticize India, create an opinion against India, create an opinion in its favor. So Pakistan को लगता है कि उसको फायदा है ना? And if China wants to do it, but generally China does not raise territorial issues in the Security Council, but China clearly is a member of the Security Council. So it is in a position to take up issues at effective platforms. And certainly if China does it, it is to create pressure on India. China does it as a pressure point on India. China is not going to seek the opinion of United Nations or any other international body on territorial questions. है ना? तो इतना आसान नहीं है कि आप मिलिट्रली सारी चीजें कर लें. अगर आप मिलिट्रली सारी चीजें कर लें और फिर उसका कोई रिपरकशन नहीं हो, तो आप वही करेंगे. पर क्योंकि वो पॉसिबल नहीं है, तो फिर आप और भी तरीके अपनाते हैं, आप इकोनॉमिक टूल्स अपनाते हैं, आप डिप्लोमेटिक टूल्स अपनाते हैं. सो व्हाई कंट्रीज ट्राई टू इंटरनेशनलाइज टेरिटोरियल इश्यूज? ए, बिकॉज दैट इज वन ऑप्शन अवेलेबल टू देम. B, that may be a least costly option. And C, in the calculation of countries, they may think that that is the most effective option available at the given point in time. ये तीन calculation करके countries try and internationalize the issue. वो देखेंगे अपना फायदा क्या है. हमारा कोई फायदा नहीं है इसमें. We don't stand to gain anything. But you would also see, देखो, look at any of the recent speeches of the foreign minister or the prime minister. SCO, when we go to SCO, we always maintain a few things, that international relations must be based on rule of law, respect for multilateralism, United Nations, respect for sovereignty, respect for territorial integrity. So what a country like India does is, rather than taking up specific issues, it अंडरस्कोर सर्टेन प्रिंसिपल्स कंसिस्टेंटली। ये एम्बिग्विटी भी बहुत जरूरी है, क्योंकि अगर आपने सारी बात खुल के कह दी तो फिर आपने सामने वाले को मौका दे दिया कि आपकी पॉइंट बाय पॉइंट आपकी बात को काट सके। पर अगर आपने बात में एम्बिग्विटी रखी तो बाद में अगर सिचुएशन चेंज हो जाती है तो आप एडजस्ट कर सकते हैं। तो इंडिया कंसिस्टेंटली क्या कहता है कहीं पे भी हाईएस्ट लेवल पे कि देयर आर सर्टेन प्रिंसिपल्स which should be respected, like sovereignty of a country should be respected, so there should not be any interference. Territorial integrity of any country should be respected. ये इंडिया कहता है। क्यों कहता है? First of all, it coincides with our own concerns. Our territorial integrity is violated by Pakistan or China, so it is consistent with our concerns. Secondly, it is basically an opportunity for us to show mirror to certain countries, for example China और पाकिस्तान, है ना। लेकिन अगर हम स्पेसिफिक क्वेश्चन उसके अंदर लाइन लेंगे फिर ये हो जाएगा कि भाई क्या यूनाइटेड नेशंस समाधान दे सकता है, क्या इंटरनेशनल कोर्ट ऑफ जस्टिस समाधान दे सकता है इस तरह के मुद्दों पे? नहीं, हमको नहीं लगता कि दे सकता है। फायदा कम है, नुकसान ज्यादा है। तो ऐसा होता है हर जगह पे, हर देश चुनता है कि उसको क्या करना है। तो ये पाकिस्तान को लगता है कि इंटरनेशनलाइज करके वो क्रिएट कर सकता है प्रेशर इंडिया पे, है ना। और इस मुद्दे को जिसपे, क्योंकि इंडिया की पोजीशन क्या है कि इस मुद्दे पे कोई चर्चा हम बाहर नहीं करेंगे, तो उसको अपोज करने का पाकिस्तान को मौका मिलता है तो वो करता है। हमारे विजडम में ऐसा नहीं है, तो हम प्रिंसिपल्स को रिट्रीट करते हैं हर जगह पे, है ना। चलिए, और कोई सवाल तो नहीं है? There is a question of online. Mohan, what is ambiguity in J&K accession to India which has let Pakistan claim its control over the territory? So Mohan, the straight answer to your question would be, from India's perspective, there is no ambiguity, right? The instrument of accession as was available to all the princely states was also signed by the then sovereign of Jammu and Kashmir. So technically, legally, for us, there is no ambiguity. For us, there is no ambiguity. As to Pakistan questioning it, there can be many reasons. So Pakistan may say that it was done under duress, all right? It was done in a hurry, so on and so forth. Or Pakistan may say that the demographic principle, which was the very basis of partition, was not reflected in signing of instrument of accession. So there can be many reasons if ambiguity has to be created. But from India's perspective, just understand, we don't think that there is an ambiguity. It was a legal option available to the sovereigns. The sovereigns exercised this option and that matter is closed. The validity of the instrument of accession is for perpetuity. So India does not think that there is any ambiguity. It is Pakistan which questions the very basis of it, circumstances of it, or the principles contained in the very process of partition. तो बहुत सारे कारण हो सकते हैं जो पाकिस्तान कह सकता है कि ये गलत है, बट इंडिया के लिए कोई एम्बिग्विटी नहीं है ना। इंडिया के लिए कोई एम्बिग्विटी नहीं। दैट्स द सिंपल आंसर। दैट्स व्हाट आई एम ट्राइंग टू टेल यू बाय you having you to write these things. Now let's move forward. So we understand that terrorism and the issue of Jammu and Kashmir, some territorial questions like the issue of Jammu and Kashmir, these are the two issues which have dominated India-Pakistan relations, and because of which you will find that other aspects of relations are often undermined, not talked about, not very well developed. Right? Security and territory. These are the two things which have dominated India-Pakistan relations. We don't see any foreseeable opportunity where these differences can be satisfactorily resolved. So for the medium term, short term, we see that this scenario would continue. तो अब अगर अखबार पढ़ रहे हैं तो अखबार में अगर पढ़ेंगे इंडिया की पोजीशन क्या है, टेररिज्म के बिना बात नहीं हो सकती। पाकिस्तान की पोजीशन क्या है, जम्मू एंड कश्मीर के बिना बात नहीं हो सकती। तो ये लॉजिकली आपको समझ में आना चाहिए कि आपका फोकस कहां होना चाहिए, टेररिज्म पे, ऑन टेररिज्म, ऑलराइट, रादर देन जम्मू एंड कश्मीर, राइट? ओके, नाउ मूविंग फॉर, यू हैव अ क्वेश्चन? यस. I'm not saying it as definitively. I'm saying that if you see three kinds of options are available. Yes.
So having exhausted the diplomatic
We have fought a lot of wars. We have fought a lot of wars. So that option also has been not been exhausted. You can't say that military option has been exhausted. You can't say that. But after the development of nuclear weapons, there is a certain limit to the kind of escalation that India and Pakistan would like to go to, right? So nuclear option itself limits the military option. Number one. Number two, you cannot talk about future, what would happen in the future. But remember, military option always is the option of last resort. So imagine a scenario like a third world war. Where are the fronts being created? Which are the countries fighting on which side? Right? So when something like that, something like that happens, something as extreme as that happens, you may think of the validity of military option once again. Right? जब आप push comes to shove, जब आपके पास और कोई option नहीं है, तो आप military option तो exercise करेंगे ही करेंगे. So that option is not foreclosed. Diplomatic option is also not foreclosed. Remember, it's a process. It's not an event. है ना, आज ही solve हो जाएगा या कल solve हो जाएगा, ऐसा नहीं है. It's a process. It's not an event. Right? So that's why there is certain benefit to comparing human beings with nation states कि उसने ऐसा इसलिए किया, इसने ऐसा बात करने के लिए अच्छा है. But remember, nation states are much more complex. Right? Human beings एक अपनी जगह पे है, nation states. So इसीलिए हम generalization कर सकते हैं कि all things are interest based. These are the three options which are available. But remember, these are the three options. You cannot say that they have been exhausted. We still hope that someday we would be able to achieve peace in relations with Pakistan. How would that happen? We don't know. All right. And military option is always open, but it is always considered to be option of last resort, not the first option. Right. So just imagine such scenarios. Now moving on. So we have seen these two issues dominating India-Pakistan relations. Now we understand that there are a range of issues between India and Pakistan that we can make a list of. If you have seen the class material, you will find there is something called composite dialogue process. So the composite dialogue process between India and Pakistan is another milestone in the relations. Kyun? Because this was an extensive dialogue between India and Pakistan at multiple layers, and it included range of issues which was discussed between India and Pakistan, and it continued for nearly a decade. So the idea of composite dialogue process dates back to the 1990s. The idea was that countries like India and Pakistan, remember that saying आपने सबने सुनी होगी, former Prime Minister Mr. Vajpayee had said that one can choose one's friends but not one's neighbors. All right? Neighbors are given. It's a geographic reality. Your location is your location. You can't change it. So it's a commonsensical proposition that India and Pakistan would need to talk. 1998, when India and Pakistan became nuclear weapon states, this was felt all the more. So thereby you would see 1999, we have what is called the Lahore Declaration. So Lahore Declaration again carries forward what happened in Simla Agreement 1972. It basically reiterates the need for dialogue between India and Pakistan, the utility of peaceful bilateral dialogue for resolving the issues between India and Pakistan. And now in the face of India and Pakistan being nuclear powers, the necessity for dialogue and communication is reiterated by the Lahore Declaration. Lahore Declaration में भी हम वही सारी बातें करते हैं. बातचीत करनी चाहिए, पीसफुल बातचीत से मुद्दों का समाधान हो सकता है. अब हम न्यूक्लियर पावर्स हैं, इसलिए और भी ज्यादा जरूरी है कि हम आपस में बातचीत करें और कम्युनिकेशन बना के रखें, है ना. So that is what has been an attempt, consistent attempt in this relationship. So composite dialogue process starts in the year 2003 and continues till 2008. Composite dialogue process, एक process dialogue के process का नाम है. The initial idea came in 1990s. The idea was strengthened by the Lahore Declaration of 1999, and it started in earnest in 2003 under the Prime Ministership of Atal Bihari Vajpayee. All right, and then this continued across the governments. So when the dialogue started, Prime Minister Vajpayee was in power. The dialogue continued under Dr. Manmohan Singh as well. And throughout this period in Pakistan, we have General Parvez Musharraf in power. All right, इस पूरे period में General Parvez Musharraf, who was a military general, who deposed the then Prime Minister of Pakistan, Nawaz Sharif, in 1999. Nawaz Sharif को हटा करके Parvez Musharraf came to power. Parvez Musharraf was the military ruler, later became the President of Pakistan. So in this period, India and Pakistan are talking to each other. Composite dialogue process, 2003 to 2008. Now what we see in this particular period, why is this dialogue important? Because A, it was comprehensive in terms of inclusion of issues. So composite dialogue process was a comprehensive dialogue in the sense of the range of issues that it included. So issues like terrorism, issues pertaining to Jammu and Kashmir, issues emerging out of Indus Water Treaty, issues like trade, people to people ties, cultural relations, all these were part of the composite dialogue process. So it was comprehensive in terms of range of issues that it included. And this dialogue was also an important milestone because this dialogue was multi-layered. This was a multi-layered dialogue. What do we mean by this? So we see dialogue between highest political leadership. Prime Minister Vajpayee and President Musharraf, for example, held a summit in Agra. है ना? So highest political level पे बातचीत हो रही है. उसके अलावा foreign ministers are regularly meeting. उसके अलावा secretaries of different concerned departments are also regularly meeting. So this dialogue then is a continuous process that continues at multiple levels. Highest political dialogue, dialogue at the secretarial level, technical level, continues in this particular period. So that's another speciality of composite dialogue process, multi-layered dialogue. And you must also remember that this dialogue is important because India continues this dialogue under different governments. So even though there is a change from Mr. Vajpayee's government to Mr. Manmohan Singh's government, the dialogue continues. So we can say that this dialogue also had political acceptance. There was domestic consensus, broadly speaking, in this period in India on the dialogue, on the need for dialogue with Pakistan. ऐसा हो रहा है, आप देख सकते हैं कि ऐसा हुआ है across the governments. Now how does this dialogue come to an end? So in 2008, by 2008, General Parvez Musharraf is kicked out of power. General Parvez Musharraf is removed from power in Pakistan. And in 2008, another instance of disruption happens, which is what? The Mumbai terrorist attacks, 26/11 happens. So now you can see the जो framework हमने बनाया है वो चीजों को explain कर रहा है. आप देख पा रहे हैं? Domestic politics in Pakistan, which is not in our control. Parvez Musharraf goes out of power. And instances of violence, terrorism. This is basically what derails the dialogue process. And since then, the dialogue process has failed to recover. The composite dialogue process has failed to recover. Attempts were made under Prime Minister Manmohan Singh also. When Prime Minister Modi came to power, there were attempts made to continue dialogue with Pakistan, but that has not been possible, right, to have a sustained process. So this was the most sustained process so far in dialogue between India and Pakistan. So iska significance क्या? First of all, it tells you that there has been an extended period in which India and Pakistan have talked. So ऐसा नहीं है कि भारत और पाकिस्तान बात नहीं कर सकते, कर सकते हैं. But it also tells you that there are certain structural realities which time and again have derailed the process. So you cannot argue with structural realities. You cannot change structural realities in a day. But we can understand then that there are a range of issues that India and Pakistan can have conversation about. Right? So for example, what did we talk about on the issue of Jammu and Kashmir in this process? So officially, the open dialogue process talked about humanitarian aspects of Jammu and Kashmir, right? families live on both sides of line of control. So how can we ease the interaction between families on both sides of line of control? And then in that period you would see another development that took place, which continues so far, is the bus service between Srinagar and Muzaffarabad. All right. So cross LOC trade started during the composite dialogue process. Cross LOC trade. So even today, there are border crossing points which allow cross LOC trade. तो इतना थोड़ा बहुत डेवलपमेंट हुआ. One talked about humanitarian aspects of Jammu and Kashmir, like family reunion across the LOC. One talked about cross LOC trade. इस तरह की बात हुई. इसके अलावा it has been reported that there was a secret channel, right? A secret channel of negotiation between India and Pakistan existed. उसमें हमने क्या बात की? उसमें हमने बात की कि कैसे कॉम्प्रिहेंसिवली जम्मू एंड कश्मीर के इशू को सॉल्व कर दिया जाए. तो जितने पब्लिकली अवेलेबल रिपोर्ट्स हैं उसके बारे में क्या कहते हैं? वो कहते हैं कि इंडिया एंड पाकिस्तान वर एंटरटेनिंग मेकिंग द एलओसी सम फॉर्म ऑफ अ डी फैक्टो बॉर्डर, है ना. इंडिया एंड पाकिस्तान सीक्रेटली वर टॉकिंग अबाउट मेकिंग द एलओसी अ डी फैक्टो बॉर्डर, राइट, और सम सॉर्ट ऑफ जॉइंट एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन, राइट. सो मूविंग फ्रॉम हार्ड बॉर्डर्स टू सॉफ्ट बॉर्डर. ये सीक्रेट चैनल में बात हुई थी. बट सीक्रेट चैनल में बात हुई थी तो सरकार गई, तो बात भी गई, है ना. बट इट हैड हैपेंड. खुर्शीद महमूद कसूरी एट दैट पॉइंट इन टाइम, इंटरलोक्यूटर फ्रॉम पाकिस्तान, हैज रिटन अ बुक अबाउट इट. बट जो सीक्रेट चैनल में होता है वो कभी भी ओपनली डॉक्यूमेंट्री एविडेंस नहीं है उसके लिए, तो इसलिए आप उस चीज को पॉइंट बना के नहीं लिखते. बट ऑफिशियली हमने जम्मू एंड कश्मीर के बारे में क्या बात की? किस बारे में बात की? टेरिटरी के बारे में बात नहीं की. ये बात नहीं की कि हमने ये बात नहीं की कि वो हमारा हिस्सा नहीं है. हमने ये नहीं कहा. हमने क्या बात की? देयर इज अ प्रैक्टिकल सिनेरियो इन विच LOC exists. On both sides of LOC there are families, humanitarian aspect, and then how can we enhance interaction? So हमने ट्रेड के बारे में बात की अक्रॉस दी LOC. टेरिटोरियलिटी के बारे में बात नहीं की. वो अनक्वेश्चनेबल है एज फार एज ओपन ऑफिशियल पोजीशन इज कंसर्न. बैक चैनल निगोसिएशंस में ऑफ कोर्स हम इस तरह की बात करते रहे हैं कि जो डी फैक्टो पोजीशन है उसको सॉल्यूशन का बेसिस बना लिया जाए, है ना. कई लोग आपके भी दिमाग में आता होगा कि ऐसा कर लेते हैं. ऐसा आप में से कितने लोगों को लगता है? हाउ मेनी ऑफ यू थिंक दैट द करंट टेरिटोरियल स्टेटस को शुड बी फॉर्मलाइज्ड एज अ सॉल्यूशन टू द प्रॉब्लम विद पाकिस्तान? सवाल समझ में आया आपको मैं क्या कह रहा हूं? आप में से कितने लोगों को लगता है कि जो अभी भौगोलिक स्थिति है उसको फॉर्मलाइज कर देते हैं, फॉर्मल बना देते हैं? जो उनके पास है उनका, जो हमारे पास है हमारा, एक समाधान के रूप में, एक समाधान के रूप में इस मुद्दे के. मजा नहीं आया? कुछ लोग ऐसा कह रहे हैं कि ऐसा हो सकता है. आपको भी ऐसा लगता है कि ऐसा हो सकता है? तो देखो, जब भी सरकार की पॉलिसी बनती है ना, इसी तरह के दो लोग होते हैं. एक प्रपोजल आएगा, कुछ लोग कहेंगे मजा नहीं आया, और कुछ लोग कहेंगे कि नहीं नहीं ये समझदारी वाला प्रपोजल है, इस पे काम करते हैं. तो दोनों जब तक साथ नहीं आओगे तब तक ये चीज हो नहीं सकती. तो इसका सिंपल मतलब है, सो इवन इफ आई थिंक अबाउट इट, यू थिंक अबाउट इट, एनीवन थिंक्स अबाउट इट, इट इज नॉट पॉसिबल. क्यों? देयर इज लैक ऑफ यूनानिमिटी ऑन दिस ऑप्शन, है ना. लैक ऑफ यूनानिमिटी डोमेस्टिक पॉलिटिक्स में, देयर इज लैक ऑफ यूनानिमिटी ऑन दिस मैटर. बट प्रैक्टिकली बहुत सारे लोग ऐसा सोचते हैं, और ऐसा कहा जाता है कि सीक्रेट चैनल निगोसिएशन में भी ये बातें हुई थी. But be that as it may, beyond the composite dialogue process, what we are trying to move towards is the issue of another important issue, the issue of Indus Water Treaty between India and Pakistan. The issue of Indus Water Treaty is what we are moving towards. All right. Now, all of you have access to your class material. Did you try and look at the class material? पढ़ने की कोशिश की? किसी चीज में कोई ऐसा लगा कि आपको कुछ समझने की जरूरत है? ओके. सो व्हेन वी आर लुकिंग एट Diksha Sachdev, what are the reasons that there is a lack of confidence in J&K people in Indian government? Well, for an international relations teacher, the answer is easy. It is not to be discussed as part of international relations. All right, it's part of polity, it's part of internal security. So let's not go there. My opinion is not very important, but I'm sure if you have asked this question, you may have your own points on that. But let's talk about Indus Water Treaty. So now if you look at Indus Water Treaty, this is perhaps the only treaty instrument which has withstood various phases of the relations. Relations में इतने उतार चढ़ाव आए, लेकिन Indus Water Treaty remained a consistent feature. This is also part of what we call the dialogue phase of India-Pakistan relations. And this is also one of the few modes of communication or interaction between India and Pakistan that continues to be effective at any given point in time. अखबार पढ़ रहे होंगे आप लोग? तो इंडस वाटर ट्रीटी कभी मेंशन हुआ था आसपास? कब? प्रोजेक्ट बना रहे थे और क्या हो रहा था? डायलॉग हुआ इंडिया पाकिस्तान के बीच में जून के मंथ में. द हिंदू के अंदर कम से कम 3 आर्टिकल्स आए थे इंडिया पाकिस्तान के बारे में, इंडस वाटर ट्रीटी के बारे में. ध्यान है आपको? हिंदू पढ़ रहे हैं आप लोग? कि आपको लगता है कि केवल क्लासरूम में आ जाएंगे और काम हो जाएगा, मुझे कुछ नहीं पढ़ना पड़ेगा? नहीं, पढ़ना पड़ेगा, बिकॉज इट इज अबाउट लैंग्वेज, डेवलपिंग एन अंडरस्टैंडिंग ऑफ हाउ पीपल राइट अबाउट इट. ऐसा नहीं होगा कि आप यहां से लिख के ले जाएं वही एग्जाम में आ जाए. यूपीएससी एग्जाम में ये नहीं होता है. ऑल राइट. सो नाउ व्हेन वी आर लुकिंग एट इंडस वाटर ट्रीटीज, 60 years, more than 60 years of existence of this treaty, there is a lot that has happened, but from the perspective of the examination, what is important is you be aware of the basic fundamental aspects of it. तो आप अगर अपना मटेरियल देखेंगे तो उसके अंदर एक मैप दिया हुआ है. उस मैप में कुछ रिवर्स का नाम है. All right, so I'm bringing your attention towards the kinds of questions that UPSC asks. 2021 UPSC has asked a question related with Indus Water Treaty about rivers of the Indus Water Treaty. So basically these are location based questions inspired by different relations, right? Mains exam mein in 2016, in the mains examination, UPSC had asked a question, give an account of the Indus Water Treaty and also examine its ecological, political and economic significance in the context of changing bilateral relations between India and Pakistan, right? So let's basically simply try and understand what Indus Water Treaty is. Anyone, what is Indus Water Treaty? आप बताइए, आप दोनों जो बात कर रहे हैं आपस में, इंडस वाटर ट्रीटी क्या है? आप दोनों कुछ बोलना चाहते हैं? चलिए, बात मुझसे भी कर लिया करिए क्लास के दौरान. एनीवन, व्हाट इज इंडस वाटर ट्रीटी? लेट हो गया. द रिवर्स ऑफ, हाँ, कोई और? समझ गया मैं. यू आर सेइंग एंड यू आर ऑल्सो सेइंग दैट इट इज अबाउट some sort of water issue between India and Pakistan, river water issue between India and Pakistan. Anyone else? हाँ.
And in this treaty, east rivers, Satluj, Ravi and Vyas, the water of the river east, the water of the east rivers, Satluj, Vyas and Ravi will be utilized by the India and the water.
आपने ज्यादा पढ़ा है, आपको पता है, ये मुझे पता चल गया. लेकिन अभी भी आप कोशिश कर रहे हैं कि कैसे उसको डिफाइन करें पॉइंटेड मैनर में. और कोई? एनीवन एल्स? वी कैन स्टॉप द वाटर. सी, आप शेयरिंग की बात करते रहे, इन्होंने वाटर स्टॉप करने की बात कर ली. वाह, तो आप सभी को जानकारी है, बस मैं इतना कहना चाहता हूं, आप सभी को पता है, यू ऑल हैव द प्रिलिमिनरी लेवल ऑफ अंडरस्टैंडिंग, यू जस्ट नीड टू रीड एंड देन राइट एंड प्रैक्टिस कि आप उसको कैसे पॉइंटेड तरीके से बता पाएंगे. सो किसी भी चीज के बारे में जब हम बात करें तो सिंपली आस्क स्मॉल क्वेश्चंस लाइक what is the Indus Water Treaty all about? So if you want to write or if you don't want to write, it is your option, material के अंदर भी दिया हुआ है. I would be slow. If you want to write, ये optional है लिखना. The Indus Water Treaty was signed between India and Pakistan in 1960 with the help of the World Bank. All right? With the help of the World Bank, India and Pakistan reached to an agreement in the year 1960. Why World Bank? ये सवाल बहुत सारे लोग पूछते हैं. So remember, India and Pakistan, the basic issue that has been part of this relationship is lack of trust. All right, lack of trust. The circumstances in which partition took place was based on a single factor more than any other factor. That factor was demography, not geography. All right, so factors like geography were ignored in the formula of partition, right? So now India and Pakistan, having the experience of fighting with each other 1947, 48, 49, or the very matter of partition being a violent matter, it's easy to understand that India and Pakistan did not have much of trust on each other. And more than India, it was the problem of Pakistan, right? Pakistan lacked trust on India. So the World Bank seemed to be a neutral interlocutor. All right, it was a new organization that had come up. So the World Bank was seen to be a neutral interlocutor, a neutral arbiter. It only facilitated dialogue between India and Pakistan. All right, कभी कभी ऐसा होता है ना कि आप डायरेक्टली किसी से बात नहीं कर रहे हो, आप नाराज हो, तो बीच में किसी एक का रोल होता है मीडिएटर के रूप में. ऐसा होता है कभी कभी, है ना? आपका झगड़ा हो गया अपने सिबलिंग्स से, तो फिर आपके पेरेंट्स इंटरलोक्यूटर का रोल प्ले करेंगे, या सो ऑन एंड सो फोर्थ. सो दैट इज द रोल दैट वर्ल्ड बैंक प्लेड, राइट? इट डिड नॉट डिक्टेट any conditions. For the first 10 years of the treaty, World Bank's role was to observe the implementation of the treaty. All right, the World Bank helped in the implementation of treaty of the treaty for the first 10 years. After that, the World Bank does not have a substantial role in the treaty. So initially, since there was lack of trust, World Bank played the role of a neutral arbiter, a neutral interlocutor. And for the first 10 years, the World Bank played a role in terms of monitoring the implementation. And after that, the World Bank does not have a substantial role. So in 1960, with the mediation of World Bank, India and Pakistan entered into the Indus Water Treaty. So what is this treaty all about? History तो आपने बता दी 1960 में. What is this treaty all about? Sharing of water. तो इसको भी हम थोड़ा सा टेक्निकली ऐसा लिख सकते हैं जार्गन्स का इस्तेमाल करके. The Indus Water Treaty pertains to most complete and satisfactory utilization. The Indus Water Treaty pertains to most complete and satisfactory utilization of the waters of the Indus Basin. All right, so Indus Water Treaty pertains to most complete and satisfactory. और जब ऐसा कुछ लिख रहे हैं तो उसको क्या करेंगे? Underline. Most complete and satisfactory utilization of the waters of the Indus Basin. All right. Treaty का टाइटल ही में ये आ जाता है, मोस्ट कंप्लीट एंड सैटिस्फैक्टरी यूटिलाइजेशन. सो वाटर शेयरिंग तो बहुत सारे लोग लिखेंगे, तो आप ये लिख दें तो थोड़ा सा अंतर आ जाएगा, मतलब वही है, मोस्ट कंप्लीट एंड सैटिस्फैक्टरी यूटिलाइजेशन ऑफ द वाटर्स ऑफ द इंडस बेसिन. अगला क्वेश्चन आप पूछेंगे, हाउ, इन व्हाट वेज, right? What ways does the treaty ensure most complete and satisfactory utilization of the waters of Indus? So in simple terms, the treaty divides the 6 rivers of the basin. Class 11th ज्योग्राफी, इंडिया की ज्योग्राफी, ड्रेनेज सिस्टम नाम का एक चैप्टर है, पढ़ा होगा आपने. बहुत बढ़िया, तो ज्योग्राफिक जानकारी है आपको. So basically, the 6 rivers of the Indus basin are divided into 2 categories. So the treaty divides the Indus basin into 2 categories. One is the category of eastern rivers. Another is the category of western rivers. All right, so which are the eastern rivers? The eastern rivers are Ravi, Beas and Satluj. रॉयल बैंक ऑफ स्कॉटलैंड या जो भी नमोनिक्स आपको बनाना हो बना लीजिए. Ravi, Beas and Satluj. All right, the eastern rivers. And the western rivers are International Court of Justice, ICJ, Indus, Chenab and Jhelum. So these are the 2 categories in which the Indus Water Treaty divides the whole basin. All right, and thereby then the treaty's provisions apportion the rights over the waters of these rivers between the 2 countries, between India and Pakistan. So according to the treaty, India has unrestricted access over the waters of eastern rivers. India has unrestricted access over the waters of the Indus River. Unrestricted simply means that the treaty puts least amount of restrictions on India's utilization of the waters of eastern rivers. इसी को लोग जनरली कह देते हैं कि ये इंडिया का शहर है. अब ऐसा तो हो नहीं सकता कि आप पूरा पानी इस्तेमाल कर लें, बट बहुत एक्सटेंसिव यूज कर सकते हैं ईस्टर्न रिवर्स के वाटर्स का, है ना. नदी तो बहती रहेगी, आप नदी रोक तो सकते नहीं है, बट least amount of restrictions. That is the only meaning, unrestricted access. And then the treaty provides Pakistan with unrestricted access to the waters of western rivers. All right, western rivers. So unrestricted access to the waters of eastern rivers lies with India. Unrestricted access to the waters of western rivers lies with Pakistan. All right, so that is basically what the treaty does. Now the interesting question would be, in this context, what is India's rights over the waters of western rivers? So of course, as the primary understanding tells you, that India has certain restrictions on the usage of waters of the western river, right? So basically, on the western rivers, India has rights of non-consumptive use. So India's right is not unrestricted. Non-consumptive use का right है India के पास. What does it mean? It simply means such usage of water which does not result in substantial change in the availability of water downstream. All right. So that is basically what India can do, non-consumptive use. What kind of use would come under non-consumptive use? Drinking, sanitation, navigation, all right, gardening at small usage, municipal usage. So these kind of usage would come under non-consumptive use. आप large scale projects नहीं बना सकते इस पे. Non-consumptive use is what treaty says India can exercise over the waters of western river. Non-consumptive purposes के लिए इस्तेमाल कर सकता है इंडिया, right? Simple. मतलब क्या हुआ उसका? Municipal usage, domestic usage such as drinking water, right? Sanitation, navigation, इन सारी चीजों के लिए इंडिया वेस्टर्न रिवर्स का वो के वाटर्स को यूज कर सकता है. कैन इंडिया मेक हाइड्रो पावर स्टेशंस ऑन द वेस्टर्न रिवर्स? कैन इंडिया मेक? सो दो तरह के लोग हैं, एक कुछ कह रहे हैं यस, कुछ कह रहे हैं नो. नो यस वाले बता दें. यस कौन कह रहा है? कैन इंडिया मेक हाइड्रो पावर स्टेशन ओवर वेस्टर्न रिवर्स? अगली क्लास से थोड़ा आगे आके बैठिएगा, आपकी आवाज मुझ तक नहीं पहुंच रही है. इंडिया कैन मेक हाइड्रो पावर स्टेशंस ओवर द वेस्टर्न रिवर्स, बट इंडिया कैन नॉट create storage structures on the western rivers. So meaning India's rights to construct hydropower stations over western rivers have to be within the stipulations of the treaty. है ना? Within the limitations of the treaty, India can build hydropower stations on the western rivers, but cannot build storage structures. So India can build hydropower stations, but cannot build storage structures. है ना? क्योंकि वो फिर नॉन कंजम्पटिव यूसेज के बाहर चला जाएगा. सो इसको सिंपल समझने का तरीका है. हाउ डू यू प्रोड्यूस इलेक्ट्रिसिटी फ्रॉम अ रिवर? हाइड्रो पावर. You create a dam. What does a dam do? It basically holds the potential energy of the water, and then you convert it into kinetic energy and then electrical energy. But in the whole process, you are creating a storage structure. You are creating a dam, and that dam is creating a reservoir. All right? यही होता है ना. आप डैम बनाते हैं, डैम के पीछे रिजर्वॉयर जिसमें पानी स्टोर्ड है, और फिर आप पानी को कंट्रोल्ड तरीके से रिलीज कर सकते हैं. राइट? सो इंडिया कैनॉट बिल्ड स्टोरेज स्ट्रक्चर्स ऑन दी वेस्टर्न रिवर्स, बट इंडिया कैन बिल्ड हाइड्रो पावर स्टेशंस विद इन द लिमिटेशंस ऑफ द ट्रीटी. है ना? टेक्निकल लिमिटेशंस हैं. सो जनरली यू विल सी दैट ऑन वेस्टर्न रिवर्स द टर्म रन ऑफ द रिवर प्रोजेक्ट comes into play. Run of the river projects. Right? So you will find that on western rivers, India generally constructs run of the river projects. Run of the river project क्या हो गया? कोई इंजीनियर है क्लास में? बहुत सारे होंगे. नेचुरल फ्लोइंग. जनरली वही करना, मतलब आपको लीस्ट ऑब्स्ट्रक्शन क्रिएट करके पानी का इस्तेमाल करना है. सो बेसिकली स्लोप ग्रेडियंट का इस्तेमाल करके, या फिर आपने एक स्ट्रीम से पानी को निकाला, टरबाइन से रन किया, और दूसरी स्ट्रीम से उसको वापस कर दिया मेन स्ट्रीम के अंदर. है ना? रन ऑफ द रिवर प्रोजेक्ट विदाउट क्रिएटिंग एनी स्टोरेज स्ट्रक्चर. सो बेसिकली यू विल फाइंड रन ऑफ द रिवर प्रोजेक्ट्स ऑन दिस पर्टिकुलर सेक्शन ऑफ द इंडस बेसिन. सो बेसिकली ऐसे ये जो ट्रीटी है, दिस एम्स टू क्रिएट राइट्स एंड ऑब्लिगेशंस एंड देयर बाय इंश्योर मोस्ट कंप्लीट एंड सेटिस्फैक्टरी यूटिलाइजेशन ऑफ द वाटर्स ऑफ. तो परसेंटेज वाइज पानी नहीं बटा हुआ है ना, कि 80% तुम्हारा, 20% हमारा. 6 rivers, 2 categories, and the kinds of access, kinds of rights are defined within the treaty. है ना? सो उसमें हमको याद रखना है विच आर दी वेस्टर्न रिवर्स, विच आर दी ईस्टर्न रिवर्स. ईस्टर्न रिवर्स आर इंपॉर्टेंट फॉर अस. व्हाई? बिकॉज वी हैव unrestricted access on the waters of eastern rivers. On the western rivers, we have non-consumptive rights. We can build hydropower stations on western rivers, but cannot build storage structures. So that's where you would see most of the times the kind of hydropower stations that we are talking about on western rivers are run of the river projects. All right? तो ऐसा होता है. Now the treaty also then provides for certain mechanism to address contentious issues pertaining to the treaty. It creates structures in helping the implementation, for helping in the implementation of the treaty. So one such structure is called the Permanent Indus Commission. Permanent Indus Commission. The treaty creates Permanent Indus Commission. For what? It helps, the Permanent Indus Commission helps in the implementation, of the treaty. It helps in maintenance of communication, maintaining communication, and also helps in exchange of इंफॉर्मेशन. सो ये बेसिकली एक ब्यूरोक्रेटिक बॉडी है जिसका काम क्या है, इंप्लीमेंट करने में, ट्रीटी को इंप्लीमेंट करने में मदद करना. ऑल राइट, सो इट डज सो बाय एक्टिंग एज अ कंड्यूट, एज अ चैनल for communication between India and Pakistan on the relevant issues, and also for the exchange of information on water flow, right? What kind of projects are being planned. And then another role that this particular body plays is in resolving questions, resolving questions pertaining to Indus Water Treaty. है ना, ये एक और रोल है परमानेंट इंडस कमीशन का, रिजॉल्विंग questions. If there are any questions of any of the governments, they can raise it at the level of permanent Indus Commission. Permanent Indus Commission. So basically, each of the governments appoints an Indus Commissioner, right? India और पाकिस्तान एक Indus Commissioner appoint करते हैं, है ना? So it comprises of the two Indus commissioners from India and Pakistan, and it meets regularly. It meets every year. So that's where it was in news. Permanent Indus Commission 118th meeting took place in the month of May, 31st May 2022. So this body has been regularly meeting. Remember, the treaty was signed in 1960 और लगभग कितने साल हो गए, 62. So in 62 years 118 meetings, meaning this body has been fairly regular in terms of its meeting. आप कंटेंट पढ़ेंगे तो 2018 में आखिरी मीटिंग हुई थी, बट दैट इज व्हाट, सो पीपल कम एंड आस्क कि इतना से हो जाएगा. अब भाई 116वीं मीटिंग हुई थी 2018 तक, 2019 में मीटिंग नहीं हुई, 20 में मीटिंग नहीं हुई, 21 में मीटिंग नहीं हुई, 2022 में 2 मीटिंग हो गई, तो वो तो आपको ऐड करना पड़ेगा ना. तो ये बेसिकली दैट इज व्हाई यू कंटिन्यू टू रीड न्यूज़पेपर, बिकॉज दीज आर द थिंग्स व्हिच कीप ऑन हैपनिंग. 118th मीटिंग so far, 118 meetings of the Permanent Indus Commission have taken place. So this is a body created by the Indus Water Treaty itself. So if there is an issue of contention and it is raised by the governments at this forum, it is called question. So this particular body helps in the resolution of questions pertaining to the implementation of the treaty. Right? Now, if questions remain unresolved, questions are solved at the level of Permanent Indus Commission. If questions remain unresolved, they become what are called differences. अगर क्वेश्चन सॉल्व नहीं हुआ तो उसको कह देते हैं, क्या कहते हैं उसको, डिफरेंस. डिफरेंस के लिए क्या मैकेनिज्म देता है ट्रीटी, डिफरेंस has to be resolved by the appointment of, with the help of a neutral expert. मतलब इंडिया और पाकिस्तान का नहीं, hydrological expert, legal expert to be appointed at the request of these two governments, and the opinion of that neutral expert then should resolve the difference. But if even after this difference is not resolved, it is considered to be a dispute. Indus Water Treaty के अंदर question unresolved becomes difference, difference unresolved becomes dispute, and for the resolution of dispute the provision is that of an arbitration panel appoint करना है to resolve the dispute, right? So in the appointment of the neutral expert or the arbitration panel, the World Bank plays a facilitating role. अपने से नहीं अपॉइंट कर देगा, upon the request of the parties. Parties का मतलब इंडिया एंड पाकिस्तान. If they request that we want appointment of a neutral expert, World Bank helps in the appointment of neutral expert, legal expert, hydrological expert, engineering expert, जिसकी भी राय से बात बन जाए. And then if even after the opinion of the neutral expert, आपने डॉक्यूमेंट जमा किए, एक्सपर्ट ने अपनी राय दी कि भाई किसकी बात ज्यादा सही है, उसके बाद भी अगर बात सॉल्व नहीं हुई तो वो डिस्प्यूट कहा जाता है. और डिस्प्यूट को समाधान कैसे करते हैं? आर्बिट्रेशन पैनल के अपॉइंटमेंट से. और आर्बिट्रेशन पैनल अपॉइंटमेंट इज ऑल्सो फैसिलिटेटेड बाई द वर्ल्ड बैंक. ऑल राइट, बट नॉट विदाउट द रिक्वेस्ट ऑफ द पार्टीज, है ना, विद द रिक्वेस्ट ऑफ द पार्टीज ओनली. तो ये होता है, आप ये याद रखेंगे, राइट. सो द इंडस वाटर ट्रीटी क्रिएट्स अ परमानेंट इंडस कमीशन which comprises of Indus commissioners appointed by India and Pakistan. The permanent Indus commission then helps in the implementation of the treaty by facilitating communication and exchange of information. The permanent Indus commission also helps in resolving questions pertaining to implementation of the treaty. When the questions remain unresolved at the level of permanent Indus commission, अब बात आगे चली गई, so then the provision is that it is a difference, and difference has to be resolved by appointment of a neutral expert. If even after this stage, after the opinion of neutral expert, the issue is not resolved, it becomes a dispute. Dispute is resolved by the appointment of an arbitration panel, and in the appointment of arbitration panel as well as neutral expert, World Bank plays a facilitating role. That is what happens in the Indus Water Treaty. So here we take a small break. And after the break, we continue with India-Pakistan relations. We will look at the Indus Water Treaty from analytical perspective, questions कैसे आते हैं, and then we'll move towards what are called low-hanging fruits in this relationship. If you have any questions, think of that. सोच के रखिए अपने सवाल, और ब्रेक के बाद जब आएंगे तो पहले सवाल लेंगे. Okay, so we are back from the break. If you have any questions, please raise those questions now. कोई सवाल है अगर आपके पास? मैं जानता हूं कि अलग अलग बैच है, कंबाइंड बैच है, बहुत सारे लोग आपस में दोस्त हैं, बहुत सारे लोग आपस में कॉम्पिटिटर्स होंगे, जो भी है. क्लासरूम के बाद, क्लासरूम के अंदर कोई सवाल है आपके पास? नहीं, चलिए फिर आगे चलते हैं. थोड़ा जोर से बोलेंगे. अरुणाचल प्रदेश के सांसद को आप सुन रहे थे? हाँ. कहा? चाइना ने विलेज बनाया है. हाँ, तो जो गवर्नमेंट कह रही है एग्जाम में, उसको याद रखेंगे. इस तरह की चीजों से सवाल नहीं आते, है ना, इस तरह की चीजों से सवाल नहीं आते. चलिए, so we are talking about Indus Water Treaty. Let's simply try and understand if there are any challenges pertaining to this treaty. हमने समझ लिया basically जितना हमको समझना था. How does this treaty operate? How does this treaty work? So now there are few things that we should understand why this treaty is important. Importance or significance और implications of this treaty, जो भी आपको बेहतर लगे समझने में, इन सारी चीजों की बात करें. Why is this treaty important? Why can we say or argue that this is an important milestone in India-Pakistan relations? So there are various reasons which can be given. So for example, if you read the class material, you will find that it has been called a ray of hope in a dark world. All right? Because remember, in what circumstance has the treaty come up? Internationally, if you see, थोड़ा वर्ल्ड हिस्ट्री पढ़ लेंगे तो आपको अपने आप अंदाजा हो जाएगा. What is happening? The world has seen a world war. Second World War has happened, and after that, soon after that, you have the Korean War, and then you have the building of tension between two of the greatest powers on earth, US and USSR. And generally, that is a time of military competition or conflicts. 1950s, 1960s, दुनिया भर में कहीं भी देख लो यही हो रहा है. सुएज क्राइसिस कब हुआ? 1950s. All right, Korean War, 1950, and then US invasion of Vietnam, that also starts in 1950s. So generally understand it is a time of military rivalries, conflicts. So in that context, the two countries, India and Pakistan, coming to an understanding on a contentious issue like shared rivers is considered by many to be an achievement, right? A victory of diplomacy, a ray of hope in a dark, bleak world, ऐसा कुछ लोगों ने कहा. So the significance of the treaty can be derived from the fact that it has survived a very long period. So the longevity of the treaty makes it important. A treaty has stood for more than 6 decades, an important treaty between India and Pakistan. So the longevity of the treaty is the first reason why we say that it is important, it is significant. All right? And having said that, we also remember that in 60 years there is a lot that has happened. So initially when India signed this treaty, India signed with the hope of peace and trust. All right, that the treaty provided a basis for peace and trust in the relationship. We are still talking about the Indus Water Treaty, right? These are the rivers that we have already talked about, right? Now, so the longevity of the treaty, and then the fact that the treaty in some ways represents hope for peace and trust, is also what makes it politically significant. Its political and diplomatic significance lies in two facts. One, the treaty has been standing for more than 6 decades, longevity of the treaty. Second, the treaty in the initial circumstance when it was signed with the hope of peace and trust. India expected that there would be peace, India and Pakistan can build trust. So the treaty politically is significant because it is one of the basis of expecting peace and trust in India-Pakistan relations. Then if we move forward, it also has in some ways prevented a conflict on water between India and Pakistan. So the fact that India and Pakistan have fought multiple wars in these 60 years, there have been wars, there have been terrorism, there has been terrorism, but India and Pakistan have not fought a war on water. And that is important in a region where there is a lack of trust, a region where there is water stress. So some people argue that the treaty is also significant. One of its implications has been that it has prevented conflict on water. It becomes all the more important because अभी आप कई बार सुनते होंगे कि the Third World War would be fought on the issue of water. So at least on water, India and Pakistan did not fight a war. So this in a way has prevented conflict. So initially, 1948, an agreement, an understanding dating back to the British period had expired, right? So many in Pakistan started arguing that India aims to choke Pakistan dry. India wants to cut off water supplies. So from the beginning, this was a contentious issue. River waters was a contentious issue. Remember, the Britishers had developed canal systems and expanded irrigation and thereby agriculture in what is today's Punjab province of Pakistan. Britishers ने agricultural colonies बसाई, बहुत सारे जो districts हैं पाकिस्तान के पंजाब में आज, those were established by the Britishers and this was based on the expansion of irrigation network, canal system जो इन rivers पे बनाया था. So after partition, the mouth of the canal is in Pakistan, the head is in India.
All right, the tail is in Pakistan, the head is in India. So the starting point of waters is India. So many in Pakistan believed that India may cut off the water supply. India did not want that. India understood that it may become an issue of conflict. So India thereby was agreeable to an agreement which created legal rights and obligations. तो किसी भी एक चीज को अगर आप डील करने का कोई तरीका शुरुआत में ही निकाल लें आपस में समझ के, तो आप ये मानते हैं जैसे आप क्रिकेट का कोई गेम खेल रहे हो, है ना, सो हर बार आपको स्टेडियम तो मिलता नहीं है, और क्रिकेट के गेम में तो झगड़ा होना ही होना है ना, बैट किसका, बॉल किसका, नो बॉल थी या नहीं थी. तो पहले से ही अगर आप रूल बना लें तो क्या है, आपकी उम्मीद क्या हो जाती है कि आप जो भी रूल है उसके बारे में झगड़ा नहीं करेंगे, आपके पास एक पीसफुल तरीका है चीजों को सॉल्व करने का. दिस इज व्हाट हैपेंड इन द इंडस वाटर ट्रीटी. All right, if water is cricket, then Indus Water Treaty basically creates the rules of that game, right? How is that to be played? So conflict prevention happened in that way. 1948 was one occasion where an agreement had expired, and then there were allegations in Pakistan that India may cut off the water supply. India restored water supply in 1948 also. 1960, India signed a Indus Water Treaty with Pakistan, which created legal basis for dealing with any issues arising out of it. Now, many people also argue that this treaty in some ways has also been able to bring in the consideration of environment or ecology. So one of the ecological significance of this treaty is that the treaty directly enjoins or calls for the parties to prevent undue pollution of the rivers, prevent undue pollution of the rivers. All right, meaning this is an ecological or environmental aspect that comes out of the treaty, because so far we are only thinking about India and Pakistan, but rivers are rivers after all, they are natural entities, right? So the treaty in terms of environment has a direct provision wherein it calls the parties to prevent undue pollution of the streams. यहाँ पे अगर आपको थोड़ा सा broader view develop करना हो तो you just look at the things in or issues in the timeline as they have happened. So remember, initially as I said, 1950s, 1960s are years of military tensions, conflicts. So that's why diplomacy becomes all the more important. कैसे tensions को शांत किया जाए. But if you look at the international debate in another perspective, from economic perspective, what you would find is initial years after the Second World War are dominated by issues of development. Issues of development are more important. ऐसा आप पढ़ेंगे, आप जब अपनी पढ़ाई पूरी कर लेंगे तो ये आपको perspective बन जाएगा. That development is more important in those particular years, right? So that's why you have initially the creation of World Bank, IMF, etc. But when do you see environment coming into consciousness? अगर आप एक नजर दौड़ाए तो environment, when does it become important on international agenda? तो जब अगर आप environment ecology पढ़ोगे तो आप क्या देखोगे? There is a book written by Russell Carson, नाम सुना है आपने? Russell Carson का Silent Springs नाम की किताब लिखी है उन्होंने. NCERT class 12th biology, environment and ecology. So it is in the 1960s, Russell Carson or scholars like her, she is not the only one, are writing books like Silent Springs. So then that basically brings the debate on environment and development to the center. That development may have an environmental cost and that has to be balanced. So thereby you would see 1970s, क्या होता है 1970s में? नाम सुना है आपने अर्थ समिट का? हाँ? Human and Environment, Brundtland Commission report comes up, and domestically now see what is happening in that particular period. Wildlife Conservation Act कब आता है? 1970s में. Air pollution, water pollution, इन सब से related laws कब आते हैं? 1970s में. So now can we say that gradually the concern moved from development to a balance between development and environment. So Indus Water Treaty 1960 की treaty है, बहुत ज़्यादा ecology environment के बारे में बात नहीं करती है, but directly says that both the sides should make an effort to prevent undue pollution of the rivers. इतना हम कह सकते हैं भाई पुराने जमाने की ट्रीटी, लेकिन फिर भी थोड़ा एनवायरमेंट का ख्याल है इसके अंदर. तो ये एक और implication और एक और important चीज होगी. So thereby some people say that by ensuring a legal framework to maintain adequate flow in the basin, the treaty may also have contributed towards the preservation of species like fresh water dolphin. Species like freshwater fish species कैसे हो गई? तो basically some people argue that by ensuring an adequate legal framework for the flow of water in the basin, the treaty may have contributed to the preservation of species like fresh water dolphin. अब कहते हैं दुनिया में बहुत ही कम जगह पे फ्रेश वाटर डॉल्फिन पाई जाती है. कहां कहां पे? नेशनल एक्वेटिक एनिमल कौन सा है हमारा? गैंजेटिक डॉल्फिन. So there are very few species of freshwater dolphin. अमेजोन एक तो हो गया अमेजोन में, दूसरा हमारे यहाँ सब कॉन्टिनेंट में इन द गैंजेस, इन ब्रह्मपुत्रा एंड ऑल्सो इन द इंडस. और इसके अलावा एक और फ्रेश वाटर डॉल्फिन गैंजेस हो गया, गैंजेस हो गया, गैंजेस हो गया. There is a river called Irrawaddy. In Irrawaddy also you will find fresh water dolphin. Irrawaddy कहां पे है? म्यांमार में. It flows through म्यांमार, right? ऐसा जरूरी नहीं कि आप ये सब लिख लें, बस रिलेट करते हुए बोल रहे हैं. इकोलॉजिकल सिग्निफिकेंस क्या है? फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल द ट्रीटी creates some expectation of prevention of pollution, and indirectly it may have contributed to ecological preservation, for example the preservation of species like freshwater dolphin. So in international relations you try to make points by borrowing from other disciplines. आपको जितना आता है आप उतना points बना सकते हैं, add कर सकते हैं. All right, why else is this treaty important? What else is the implication of this treaty? What else can we say? That the treaty has in a way a support base for agrarian economy in an arid region. In a region which is water stressed, which is primarily based on agriculture, the Indus Water Treaty is an important instrument in terms of how it has facilitated economic activities, agrarian activities in an arid region. ये पॉइंट पाकिस्तान के लिए ज्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट हो जाता है क्योंकि पाकिस्तान, शुरू में हमने बात की, वन ऑफ द इंपॉर्टेंट रिसोर्स डोमेन्स दैट पाकिस्तान हैज इज द इंडस वाटर ट्रीटी. सो दैट इज द इकोनॉमिक significance of this particular treaty, that it has supported agrarian economy in an arid region. It has supported activities like fisheries. It has supported navigation by creating a legal basis for the same. Right? Why else this treaty can be said to be important? और क्या कारण जोड़ सकते हैं आप, बना सकते हैं अपने अपनी कहानी? चलिए हाइड्रो पावर जनरेशन प्रोजेक्ट से मान लिया, इकोनॉमिक एस्पेक्ट्स में जोड़ दिया आपने उसको, और सप्लाई ऑफ ड्रिंकिंग वाटर, बहुत बढ़िया. चलिए तो आप अपने पॉइंट जोड़ सकते हैं, बट हमने ब्रॉडली किस तरह के पॉइंट्स देखे? इफ यू वुड रिमेंबर, पॉलिटिकल डिप्लोमैटिक पॉइंट्स, इकोलॉजिकल पॉइंट्स एंड इकोनॉमिक पॉइंट्स. व्हाई इज दिस ट्रीटी इंपॉर्टेंट? व्हाट हैज बीन इट्स implication? And why are we talking about it? Why are we talking about it? So we are talking about it because in UPSC there has been a question from this particular topic. क्या है क्वेश्चन? आप पढ़िए और ये सोचिए कि क्या आप इसका जवाब लिख पाएंगे. So my question to all of you is, would you be able to, on the basis of the discussion, on the basis of class material, be able to answer a question like this? अब हम यूपीएससी का क्वेश्चन लेके आए. मेन जॉब तो हमारा यही है ना, दुनिया भर का ज्ञान इकट्ठा कर लेंगे, उससे क्या फायदा है? बहुत सारे सवाल आप लोग पूछते हैं, व्हाट इफ ऐसा होता तो क्या होता, यूं होता तो क्या होता। तो यूं होता तो क्या होता पे यूपीएससी का प्रिपरेशन चलता नहीं है, राइट? यू हैव सम एविडेंस व्हाट काइंड ऑफ क्वेश्चन हैज यूपीएससी आस्क्ड एंड वुड वी बी एबल टू आंसर दिस क्वेश्चन। क्या क्वेश्चन है? पढ़ने में किसी को कोई दिक्कत नहीं है ना? द क्वेश्चन इज present an account of the Indus Water Treaty and examine its ecological, economic and political implications in the context of changing bilateral relations. So remember, no matter how much you know, you are ultimately going to write an answer in 150 words and 250 words. So आपको कितना भी आता हो, 4 पॉइंट हर चीज के बारे में, यूपीएससी की प्रिपरेशन के बारे में एक बहुत ही फेमस सेइंग है, हर चीज के बारे में 4 पॉइंट पता होना चाहिए। ऑलराइट, सो फर्स्ट पार्ट, क्वेश्चन को जो अब आप देख रहे हैं, तो अब क्वेश्चन को भी तोड़ना शुरू करें, है ना? फर्स्ट पार्ट इज प्रेजेंट एन अकाउंट ऑफ द इंडस वाटर ट्रीटी। ये क्या है? ये जो पार्ट है, ये इसको कह सकते हैं डिस्क्रिप्टिव पार्ट। ऑलराइट, डिस्क्रिप्टिव पार्ट, फर्स्ट पार्ट जो है डिस्क्रिप्टिव है। तो अगर ये पार्ट डिस्क्रिप्टिव है तो इसका मतलब ही हमको इसमें क्या लिखना है? व्हाट वुड वी राइट? व्हाट इज द ट्रीटी? हाउ इज दैट ट्रीटी? हाउ डज दैट ट्रीटी एम टू गवर्न द मैटर ऑफ वाटर बिटवीन इंडिया एंड पाकिस्तान इन द इंडस बेसिन? वो पहला पार्ट हो गया, कहानी, प्रेजेंट एन अकाउंट, डिस्क्रिप्टिव। सेकेंड पार्ट इज गोइंग टूवर्ड्स एनालिटिकल, उसमें लिखा है एग्जामिन। व्हेन यू आर एग्जामिनिंग समथिंग, यू ब्रेक डाउन अ लार्जर इशू इनटू इट्स स्मॉलर कंपोनेंट्स, है ना? 3-4 मेन पॉइंट्स आप निकालेंगे और इसमें लिखना कैसे है इस पे, तो और 3-4 पॉइंट्स आप निकालेंगे और उन 3-4 पॉइंट्स के बारे में कुछ लिखेंगे, है ना? ये बेसिकली पर्पस है एग्जामिन। तो यूपीएससी ने आपके लिए आसान कर दिया बाय टेलिंग यू कि किस पॉइंट्स पे लिखना है। सो सब पॉइंट्स बनाते हैं आप जब क्वेश्चन से, तो कभी कभी आप क्वेश्चंस की मदद ले लीजिए। क्वेश्चंस आपको खुद सब पॉइंट बनाने के बारे में बता रहे, तो ये क्वेश्चन कह रहा है आपको ओपनली क्या बात करनी है आपको बताना है इसका इकोलॉजिकल, इकोनॉमिक एंड पॉलिटिकल इंप्लीकेशंस इन द कॉन्टेक्स्ट ऑफ। बैकग्राउंड क्या दे रहा है आपको? ये हो गया बैकग्राउंड, है ना? इन द कॉन्टेक्स्ट ऑफ चेंजिंग बायलैटरल रिलेशन। सो बहुत सारे लोग कहते हैं कि हिस्टोरिकल बैकग्राउंड पे ही बताना होगा। भाई आपके पास 150 वर्ड्स हैं, 250 वर्ड्स हैं, 3 मेजर डिमांड्स और या पार्ट्स हैं क्वेश्चन के। कौन से पार्ट्स पे फोकस करके आपको सबसे ज्यादा इफेक्टिवली स्कोर आने वाला है? हिस्टोरिकल बैकग्राउंड पे, या फिर पहला एक तो कहानी बताइए और दूसरा ये बताइए कि इसका इंप्लीकेशन क्या है पॉलिटिकल, इकोनॉमिक, क्योंकि ये तो सबको पता है चेंजिंग बायलैटरल रिलेशंस मतलब कभी उतार है कभी चढ़ाव है, ये तो सबको पता है। तो कॉन्टेक्स्ट पे आप बहुत ज्यादा ओवर प्ले नहीं करते हैं, है ना? आप उसको केवल मेंशन करते हैं, क्योंकि क्वेश्चन का जो सब्सटैंटिव डिमांड है वो कहीं और है। सब्सटैंटिव डिमांड ऑफ द क्वेश्चन लाइज in the structure of the questions. Question here has 2 clear parts. Part 1 asks you to tell the story, कहानी बताओ. Part 2 asks you to analyze, or for the basis of, or for that it has given you the pointers. तो अब बताइए, is there anyone who has a difficulty in writing an answer to this question? यूपीएससी का क्वेश्चन है. Anyone? If anyone says that they would have difficulty in writing the answer to this question, my next question would be, what difficulty would you have in writing the answer? Right? So अपनी problems को भी छोटे छोटे टुकड़ों में तोड़ना पड़ेगा आपको. मुझे समझ में नहीं आया, तो मेरा जवाब होगा, सवाल होगा, आपको क्या समझ में नहीं आया? मुझे कुछ समझ में नहीं आया. मुझे कुछ समझ में नहीं आएगा तो मैं कुछ नहीं कर सकता. लेकिन अगर आपने ये कहा था, उसके बाद आपने ये कहा था, इसका क्या मतलब है, मैं उसका जवाब दे सकता हूं, है ना? मुझे कुछ समझ में नहीं आएगा, जवाब मैं नहीं दे सकता. अगर आप मुझे ये बता पाए क्या समझ में नहीं आया, तो यही बात है, आपको अपनी प्रॉब्लम्स को भी छोटे छोटे टुकड़ों में तोड़ना है. एंड द ट्रिक लाइज ऑलवेज इन थिंकिंग दैट इफ अ क्वेश्चन हैज कम इन दैट मोमेंट, व्हाट कैन आई डू? मैंने सालों भर पढ़ाई नहीं की, मुझे और पढ़ लेना चाहिए था, मैं ग्रेजुएशन में और पढ़ लेना चाहिए था, मैं अच्छा स्टूडेंट नहीं हूं, ये सब सोचने का टाइम नहीं है. द क्वेश्चन हैज बीन गिवन, व्हाट कैन आई डू. ये आपको करना है, हमेशा ये एटीट्यूड लेके चलना है. बिकॉज इन द एग्जामिनेशन द क्वेश्चन दैट आई रेड इट इन दिस बुक और वहां से वैसा का वैसा क्वेश्चन आ गया, ऐसा नहीं होने वाला एग्जाम में. इन द एग्जामिनेशन यू आर गोइंग टू कंस्ट्रक्ट योर आंसर्स. आप अपना आंसर बनाने वाले हैं, इसलिए यूपीएससी के क्वेश्चंस को देखते रहें. फर्स्ट पार्ट, द डिस्क्रिप्टिव पार्ट, व्हाट इज द ट्रीटी एंड हाउ डज द ट्रीटी एम टू गवर्न द वाटर रिलेशन बिटवीन इंडिया एंड पाकिस्तान. सेकेंड पार्ट, by the presence of the treaty, what has happened? What do you see as the importance or significance of the treaty in terms of it affecting the relations? तो उसके लिए 3 पॉइंट आपको बता दिए, इकोलॉजिकल, इकोनॉमिक एंड पॉलिटिकल implications. ऑल राइट, चलिए इसके अलावा यूपीएससी ने क्या सवाल पूछा है इससे. इसके अलावा यूपीएससी ने लास्ट ईयर जो सवाल पूछा था, अब मैं फिर से अटक गया, नीचे वाला, कोई ऊपर आके मेरी मदद करेगा. कुछ चीजें मुझे भी नहीं आती. तो बेसिकली यूपीएससी ने एक सवाल पूछा था, हम कहा थे, हम सवाल पे थे. यूपीएससी ने एक सवाल पूछा था 2021 में, इन 2021. इफ यू आर लुकिंग एट दी पेपर, प्रिलिमिनरी एग्जामिनेशन, व्हाट काइंड ऑफ क्वेश्चन डिड द यूपीएससी आस्क 2021. हाँ, ए किसी ने जल्दी से जवाब भी दे दिया. ए, यूपीएससी हैड आस्क्ड अ क्वेश्चन जिसको हम कह सकते हैं, विच वी कैन से इज इंस्पायर्ड बाय इंडिया पाकिस्तान रिलेशंस. इट इज फ्रॉम वन ऑफ द फंडामेंटल एस्पेक्ट्स ऑफ इंडिया पाकिस्तान रिलेशंस, इंडस वाटर ट्रीटी, एंड विद इन दैट इट बेसिकली टेंड्स टूवर्ड्स बीइंग अ क्वेश्चन ऑफ ज्योग्राफी. आपको रिवर सिस्टम के बारे में पता होना चाहिए. सो विथ रेफरेंस टू द इंडस वाटर system of the following 4 rivers, 3 of them pour into 1 of them. ये फिर यूपीएससी ने लैंग्वेज से इसको मुश्किल बनाया था. Which joins the Indus direct. Among the following, which is one such river that joins the Indus direct? तो जिसने भी ए कहा, अब यूपीएससी का की आ चुका है. So the UPSC key says Satluj is the answer. Satluj is the answer. All right. तो यूपीएससी जो कह रहा है वो हमको मानना पड़ेगा. सतलज इज द आंसर इज व्हाट यूपीएससी सेज. ऑल राइट, ये दिस इज हाउ बेसिकली द रिवर सिस्टम लुक्स लाइक. सो समटाइम्स यूपीएससी में आस्क फ्रॉम नॉर्थ टू साउथ. नॉर्दर्न मोस्ट रिवर कौन सी है इसमें? इंडस, देन झेलम, देन चेनाब, देन रावी, देन बियास, देन सतलज. ऐसा किसी किताब में नहीं लिखा होगा. ऐसा अगर आप एटलस देख रहे हैं या मैप्स देख रहे हैं तो आप सिंपल एक अंडरस्टैंडिंग बना सकते हैं. एंड देन एट द सेकेंड लेवल इट इज अबाउट द ऑप्शंस एज दे आर गिवन. ऑप्शंस को एलिमिनेट करके भी आंसर तक पहुंच सकते हैं. ऑल राइट, सो बेसिकली यू सी झेलम मीट्स चेनाब एंड देन रावी मीट्स चेनाब, बियास मीट्स सतलज, एंड अल्टीमेटली this is flowing as Chenab and then it joins Satluj. According to UPSC, Satluj meets the Indus directly. But factually in Pakistan, the last stretch of this flow is known as Panjnad. All right, 5 rivers have met into one stream and then they meet the Indus main. UPSC ने आपको एक सवाल पूछ लिया, लैंग्वेज के हिसाब से मुश्किल बनाया, बट अल्टीमेटली दिस विजुअल रिप्रेजेंटेशन ऑफ द रिवर सिस्टम, 6 rivers, was important. All right, now let's go and look at the analytical aspect of the question. इसका मतलब क्या है? एनालिटिकल एस्पेक्ट का मतलब हम क्या करने जा रहे हैं? हम बेसिकली अब जो यूपीएससी क्वेश्चन पूछ चुकी है उससे एक लेवल आगे जाने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं. राइट, सो हम बेसिकली बात करने जा रहे हैं challenges की in the context of the treaty. Challenges, right? So sometimes what you would see is there is a context. What is the context? The context is you would see tensions continue, you would see terrorism continues to affect India-Pakistan relations. So in that context, what are the challenges with the treaty that you can think of? What are the challenges with the treaty that you can think of? Of course, that is the question that many people ask. Should the treaty be revoked? So basically, धीरे धीरे ये process क्या होता जाएगा? You would make your own questions. When you are reading something in your mind, you are making your own questions. When you are reading an NCERT, it would be a good idea to start with the questions that the NCERT chapter has. पहले question देख लो, उसके बाद chapter पढ़ो, तो समझने में आसानी होगी. Similarly, as you move forward in the preparation process, you would ask questions to yourself. Why are you reading something? For what purpose? So there is a question that many people ask, should the TT be revoked? It is in the context of tensions and terrorism. So generally the whole idea is that no matter what your personal opinion is, you should be aware of the major arguments in any particular context. आपका अपना कोई विचार हो सकता है, but the examination is not about your विचार. The examination is about an issue being discussed in public domain. पब्लिक डोमेन में चर्चा हो रही है, आपने पढ़ा है कि आपको जानकारी है. तो बेसिकली whosoever criticizes the treaty has certain points. किन पॉइंट्स पे ट्रीटी को क्रिटिसाइज किया जा सकता है? 3-4 मेजर पॉइंट्स अगर हम देखें तो पहला है दैट इट restricts, the treaty's provisions restricts India's rights. Right? That treaty is dissatisfactory because if we look at its provisions, it in some ways restricts India's rights. In what ways? Koi example? For example, on Western rivers. You can argue on Western rivers, India has only non-consumptive rights. Alright? So limits India's rights. Some people argue that the treaty is more favorable to Pakistan, that the treaty's provisions are more favorable to Pakistan rather than India. उसमें लोग आर्ग्यूमेंट देते हैं कि 80% पानी पाकिस्तान हो जाता है, 20% पानी इंडिया का. तो वो बेसिकली वो नंबर कहां से लेके आते हैं वो बताएंगे. बट जनरली द मेजर क्रिटिसिज्म इज दैट द ट्रीटी इज मोर फेवरेबल टुवर्ड्स पाकिस्तान. ऑलराइट, स्पेसिफिकली इन द कॉन्टेक्स्ट ऑफ Western rivers. And also remember the fact that India is an upper riparian. Upper riparian क्या होता है? What is an upper riparian? A country which is upstream in the flow of in the course of the river. Meaning water first flows through India and then enters Pakistan. So an upper riparian always has an upper hand. A lower riparian is always concerned about its rights. Generally ऐसा होता है, right? So in the case of Indus Water Treaty, India is an upper riparian. So technically India is in a stronger position, but some people say that the treaty is more favorable towards Pakistan. Some people argue that the provisions of the treaty hinder the development of Jammu and Kashmir. Right? Because ultimately Western rivers, if you look at the flow of the Western rivers, where are they flowing in India? They are flowing through Jammu and Kashmir. Water is an important aspect of, important resource of Jammu and Kashmir. So now the treaty favorably treating Pakistan is ultimately compromising on the rights of the people of Jammu and Kashmir. Many people would say that it hinders the development of Jammu and Kashmir. And then some people argue or criticize it for the fact that Pakistan uses the technicalities of the treaty. Pakistan uses the technicalities of the treaty. Pakistan uses the technicalities of the treaty to prevent India's projects on the western rivers. ऐसा बहुत सारे लोग कहते हैं कि Pakistan keeps on raising questions or makes them into difference or makes them into dispute, thereby delaying the implementation of India's projects on the western river. So fourth major criticism is that Pakistan's use of the technicalities of the treaty to prevent the implementation of India's projects on the western rivers. ऐसा बहुत सारे लोग कहते हैं. So बिना heated argument के, बिना एक लेवल के नीचे जाए हुए भी आप चीजों को क्रिटिसाइज कर सकते हैं. द आइडिया इज व्हाट आर दी बेसिक एस्पेक्ट्स ऑफ इट. सो दीज आर द 4 limitations, challenges, criticisms that you will find most of the people are talking about when they are talking about Indus Water Treaty. So we have taken this into consideration that this is what has happened. सच की तलाश में मत चले जाना. Points. If there is a debate in the public domain, what are the major points? So such being the case, दो चीजें. One, continuous presence of terrorism or Pakistan harming India's interests, and the limitations of the treaty has been pointed out by many, raises one question. What is that question? Should the treaty be revoked? तो इसमें एक पब्लिक ओपिनियन ले लेते हैं. हाउ मेनी ऑफ यू से it should be revoked, or how many of you say that it should not be revoked? Should it be revoked? Should the treaty be revoked? Major basis हमने बता दिया क्यों treaty has criticisms, and then Pakistan continues to harm India's interests. In that context, treaty का क्या फायदा है? Treaty should be revoked. देखो जोर से बोल दो. यूपीएससी में ये भी होता है. चाय की दुकान पे जाओगे, पीयर ग्रुप में रहोगे, जो जोर से बोलता है उसको सही मान लिया जाता है. रिजल्ट आता है तो बाद में कुछ और पता चलता है. पर यहां पे जैसे ही मैंने जोर से बोला ट्रीटी रिवोक कर देनी चाहिए, लोगों ने कह दिया हाँ. अभी देखो जैसे ही मैंने हाँ को क्रिटिसाइज किया, लोगों ने कह दिया ना. तो दिस इज व्हाट पब्लिक ओपिनियन इज. दिस इज व्हाट पब्लिक ओपिनियन इज. इट इज फिकल, है ना. इट इज फिकल. इट कीप्स ऑन चेंजिंग. बट व्हाट इज फंडामेंटल इज that if you are saying yes or if you are saying no, there has to be reason for it. UPSC का process यही है. Why are you saying yes? Why should the treaty be revoked? So first of all हमने limitations के बारे में बात कर ली, है ना. तो limitations को point out कर सकते हैं. एक, the limitations of the treaty, right? It leads to the argument when terrorism continues, when violence continues, that it seems that Pakistan continues to enjoy rights without responsibility. ऐसा argument दे सकते हैं that with the help of the treaty, Pakistan is ensured or assured its water rights, and India's expectation that there would be peace, there would be trust, is not fulfilled. So many people would argue that Pakistan enjoys rights without responsibilities, right? So ये दो कारण दे सकते हैं. तीसरा, कुछ लोग कहते हैं कि many of the ICJ, International Court of Justice judgments provide that if fundamental circumstances surrounding the signing of a treaty change, the treaty can also be changed or treaty can also be revoked, right? Fundamental circumstances. Google search में कुछ और मिले तो मुझे प्लीज बता दीजिएगा, है ना. Fundamental circumstances. So many people say that it's a lawyer's argument that ICJ has also said that if the fundamental circumstances surrounding the signing of a treaty change, the treaty may also be changed. All right. So that's why the treaty can change. So what fundamental circumstances have changed? So the argument can be that Pakistan continues to harm the interests of its co-riparian, right? Whereas India had signed the treaty in the hope, in the expectation of peace and trust, and thereby had agreed to a magnanimous treatment of Pakistan, the hope and expectations of India have not been fulfilled. All right, so we would see that Pakistan, being a co-signatory of the treaty, continues to harm the interest of India. So thereby we can say that fundamentally the treaty was signed under the circumstance where there was an expectation, hope for peace, hope for trust. Those fundamental circumstances have not resulted into the situation of peaceful relations between India and Pakistan. So thereby, such being the case, the treaty can be changed, can be revoked, it can be legally tenable. So तीन तरह की बातें कह सकते हैं वो लोग जो भी ऐसे ही ओपिनियन रखते हैं क्लास के अंदर कि ट्रीटी को रिवोक कर देना चाहिए. क्या बात कह सकते हैं? फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल, द ट्रीटी हैज इट्स लिमिटेशंस, जिसके बारे में हमने इससे पहले बात की. सेकेंड ऑफ ऑल, continuation of terrorism means Pakistan harms India's interests, and still Indus Water Treaty continues. So thereby there is a scenario where Pakistan continues to enjoy rights without responsibility, and thereby we can make a legal argument whereby we can cite the ICJ saying that if the fundamental circumstances surrounding the signing of a treaty change, a treaty can also be changed or revoked. And that has happened because Pakistan continues to harm the interest of its co-riparian, right? तो ये argument तो हमने बना दिया, but can you think of the limitations of this argument? Because आपके पास हाँ और ना के आगे जाने का सवाल है. हाँ और ना के आगे जाने का मतलब क्या? एक तो आप कारण बताएं, रीजनेबल रहे इस एग्जाम में. दूसरा, किसी भी ऑप्शन को एक्सरसाइज करने से पहले आपको यह भी सोचना पड़ेगा ना उसके फायदे क्या और नुकसान क्या है. तो इस ऑप्शन के नुकसान क्या है? ब्रह्मपुत्र, गुड पॉइंट. एक्सटर्नल एग्रेशन ऑफ चाइना ऑन द पॉइंट ऑन द फैक्टर ऑफ ब्रह्मपुत्र. यस, ओके, indirect point. हाँ सर, it will escalate the conflict. हाँ, ऐसा कहना चाहते हैं. और कोई इधर से भी पीछे? आप बेसिकली ये कहना चाहते हैं कि ये लोगों पे असर करेगा, पाकिस्तान के लोगों पे असर करेगा, बट अल्टीमेटली ये ऑप्शन जो है सही नहीं होगा, यही कह रहे हैं ना आप? तो बेसिकली सही है. आप सभी लोग, मेरा पर्पस आपसे पूछने का सवाल यही है कि एक सैंपल लेना कि आप लोग क्या सोच रहे हैं. तो सही सोच रहे हैं सभी. सो पहला, इफ यू क्रिटिसाइज दिस ऑप्शन वन इज इट मे affect India's image as a responsible country if you revoke the treaty. तो मैं सिंपली जो करने की कोशिश कर रहा हूं वो ये है, जब मैंने आपको कहा डिप्लोमेटिक, पॉलिटिकल, मिलिट्री, इस तरह से सोचने की कोशिश करें तो स्टेप बाय स्टेप ऑप्शंस को एक्सरसाइज करते हैं. डिप्लोमेटिकली क्या नुकसान है इस ट्रीटी का, ट्रीटी को रिवोक करने का, इस ऑप्शन का? It is detrimental to India's image as a responsible country, because responsible countries do not walk away from their treaty obligations. है ना, ये आपकी इमेज का सवाल है कि आपने ट्रीटी साइन की, आपकी बात है तो आप अपनी बात पूरी कर रहे हैं. So it would be detrimental for India's image as a responsible country, right? Secondly, we can say that it may lead to another conflict with Pakistan, right? It may provide Pakistan the pretext to pull India into a limited conflict or a war. Why? Because now Pakistan would have a reason of saying that India poses a existential threat, right? हम कहते हैं ना कि चोकिंग पाकिस्तान ड्राई, तो बहुत सारे ये डायलॉग मारने में अच्छा लगता है, बट नाउ इट बिकम्स द बेसिक नीड ऑफ पाकिस्तान. सो पाकिस्तान में जस्टिफाई अ वॉर और कॉन्फ्लिक्ट अगेंस्ट इंडिया. इट्स नॉट दैट कि हम डर गए इसलिए हम ऐसा नहीं करना चाहते, बट अ कॉन्फ्लिक्ट और अ वॉर वुड ऑलवेज हैव अ कॉस्ट. वी वांट टू अवॉइड दैट अननेसेसरी कॉस्ट. ऐसा नहीं कि हम डर गए, ये डर गया, वो डर गया, न्यूज चैनल में जो चलता रहता है. इट्स अबाउट अ रिस्पॉन्सिबल कंट्री वुड ऑलवेज कैलकुलेट कि क्या नुकसान है, क्या फायदे हैं. सो बेसिकली इट वुड लीड टू अनदर कॉन्फ्लिक्ट विथ पाकिस्तान. Pakistan would say that, it is an existential threat. Similarly, this option may provide China an opportunity to be a part of the issues pertaining to Indus or harm India's interest as upper riparian on Brahmaputra. All right, if we revoke the treaty, दो तरह की चीजें हो सकती है, दो तरह से चाइना शामिल हो सकता है इस मामले में. वन, बाय सेइंग दैट इंडस ओरिजिनेट्स फ्रॉम चाइना, सो नाउ वी आर ऑल्सो पार्टी टू दिस इशू, राइट? सो दैट इज समथिंग दैट कैन हैपन. सेकेंडली, ऑन ब्रह्मपुत्र वी आर द लोअर रिपेरियन, पाकिस्तान इज द अपर, चाइना इज द अपर राइपेरियन. सो China may use it as a precedent against India in the case of Brahmaputra. So basically, revoking the treaty may provide China an opportunity to intervene in the issues between India and Pakistan. All right, China, it would provide an opportunity to China to intervene in the issues between India and Pakistan. Secondly, it may act as a precedent for China to harm India's interest as an upper riparian on Brahmaputra. तो दो तरह से चाइना इसमें शामिल हो सकता है. तीसरा क्या इसका नुकसान हो सकता है? तीसरा क्या नुकसान हो सकता है? So this step or revoking the treaty may send a wrong signal to our smaller neighbors. Remember, we share rivers with other countries also. Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh. Right? So basically, revoking the Indus Water Treaty, और ये सब in the realm of probability है अभी. हम ऐसा नहीं करें कि ऐसा ही होगा, हम कह रहे हैं ऐसा हो सकता है. तो जब भी हम आंसर लिख रहे होते हैं ना, तो हम ये कह रहे होते हैं ऐसा हो सकता है, क्योंकि हम बहुत ही कम सिचुएशंस में ऐसा कह सकते हैं कि ऐसा ही होगा. ऑलराइट, सो टोन या इंटेंशन ये होता है ये कहने का कि ऐसा हो सकता है, राइट? दैट इट मे सेंड अ रॉन्ग सिग्नल टू स्मॉलर नेबर्स ऑन द इशू ऑफ ट्रांस बाउंड्री रिवर्स. इट मे सेंड अ रॉन्ग सिग्नल टू स्मॉलर नेबर्स ऑन द इशू ऑफ ट्रांस बाउंड्री रिवर्स. तो इसलिए हमें ऑप्शंस होने के बावजूद भी ऑप्शन एक्सरसाइज नहीं करना चाहिए. ये मतलब है, लिमिटेशन ये है. इसके अलावा दो तीन पॉइंट आप खुद भी सोच सकते हैं. दैट एज यू सेड दैट while the purpose is to change the behavior of rulers of Pakistan, revocation of the treaty may affect the rights of people of Pakistan, rights over water. ऐसा आप सोच सकते हैं, है ना? हाँ, आप क्या कह रहे थे? बिल्कुल कह सकते हैं, अगर आपके पास समय है तो बिल्कुल कह सकते हैं इट वुड बी अगेंस्ट. लेकिन मैं जो कह रहा हूं ये पहले पार्ट में आ गया है ना, इमेज, है ना? तो आप क्या, एज एन एग्जाम्पल अगर आपके पास समय है तो आप बिल्कुल लिख सकते हैं, पर डिप्लोमेटिक पॉइंट में वो आ गया. बिल्कुल कह सकते हैं आप. अब आप उन ऑब्वियस पॉइंट्स के बाहर जा रहे हैं, लेकिन क्वेश्चन के अंदर इतना सारा लिखने का मौका नहीं होगा. जैसे एक पॉइंट और आप क्या कह सकते हैं, दैट ए वाइल revoking the treaty may have a symbolic effect. It ट्रीटी रिवोक करके हम क्या कहना चाहते हैं? हम पाकिस्तान को बताना चाहते हैं कि इफ यू कंटिन्यू टू हार्म आवर इंटरेस्ट, वी आर नॉट गोइंग टू स्टैंड साइलेंट, राइट? वी आर गोइंग टू टेक एक्शन. सो वी वांट टू कन्वे आवर सीरियसनेस. इट वुड कन्वे आवर सीरियसनेस. ठीक है, साथ में ये नुकसान हो सकता है, बट अल्टीमेटली व्हाट इफेक्ट, व्हाट कॉन्क्रीट इफेक्ट वुड इट हैव? कैन यू स्टॉप द रिवर फ्रॉम फ्लोइंग? नदी तो फिर भी बहती रहेगी. अभी तो ट्रीटी है, तो ट्रीटी के अंदर आप क्वेश्चन बना लो, डिफरेंस बना लो, डिस्प्यूट बना लो, पीसफुल तरीके से रिजॉल्व करने का तरीका है. ट्रीटी रिवोक कर दी तो नदी का फ्लो तो रुक नहीं गया. इफ यू हैव टू स्टॉप वाटर फ्रॉम गोइंग टू पाकिस्तान, यू हैव टू बिल्ड लार्ज डैम्स. लार्ज डैम्स, रिजर्वॉयर किधर को होगा? इंडिया की तरफ. डिस्प्लेसमेंट कहां पे होगा? इंडिया की तरफ. सो टेक्निकली भी फीजिबल नहीं है इस ऑप्शन को एक्सरसाइज करना बियॉन्ड द पॉइंट. ऑलराइट, आप क्या कहना चाहते हैं? पाकिस्तान को नाराजगी बताना चाहते हैं, तो फिर आपको देखना पड़ेगा दूसरे ऑप्शन की तरफ. तो नो, द ट्रीटी शुड नॉट बी रिवोक्ड. व्हाई द ट्रीटी शुड नॉट बी रिवोक्ड? व्हाट इज द रीजन व्हाई द ट्रीटी शुड नॉट बी रिवोक्ड? बिकॉज हम ये बात कर चुके हैं, है ना? जो लिमिटेशंस है यस के आर्ग्यूमेंट की, वो रीजंस हैं नो के आर्ग्यूमेंट की. दैट revoking the treaty may only have symbolic value, but it would be technically unfeasible and it would have certain other repercussions. So no, because the yes option has certain limitations. अभी मैं किसी और का पॉइंट नहीं ले रहा हूं, क्योंकि थोड़ा जल्दी इसको अब रैप अप करें, राइट? मैं आप सभी के मन में विचार होंगे, बहुत अच्छी बात है. तो नो, द ट्रीटी शुड नॉट बी रिवोक्ड सीम्स टू बी अ बेटर option, because yes has more limitations as compared to benefits. All right, but the thing is, if the treaty should not be revoked, then also the point is the same. What are the options available to India? All right, to put pressure on Pakistan with the instrument of Indus Water Treaty. Right? Short of revoking the treaty, what are the options available to India to put pressure on Pakistan? Because remember, ultimately, the purpose is to change the behavior of Pakistan. Either you do it by attraction or by coercion. अभी attraction का काम चल नहीं रहा है क्योंकि झगड़ा चल रहा है. So how can we make Indus Water Treaty a pressure point on Pakistan? Right? So that is the question. जिसको आप कह देते हैं way forward, क्योंकि किसी भी समस्या का final solution नहीं है. या तो सजेस्टेड सॉल्यूशन है या मैनेजमेंट के तरीके हैं. ऑलराइट, सो व्हाट इज द वे फॉरवर्ड? व्हाट शुड इंडिया डू शॉर्ट ऑफ रिवोकिंग द ट्रीटी टू कन्वे इट्स सीरियसनेस एंड पुट प्रेशर ऑन पाकिस्तान within the framework of without revoking the treaty, or within the framework of the treaty? So basically there are few major arguments. Optimize the utilization of India's share, optimize the utilization of India's share of the eastern rivers. ऐसा हमें करना चाहिए. We should put in place all measures possible to ensure that we use the last drop of our शेयर. ऐसा कुछ लोग कहते हैं कि वी शुड यूज द लास्ट ड्रॉप ऑफ आवर शेयर. ईस्टर्न रिवर्स पे रेस्ट्रिक्शन नहीं है, तो हम ऐसे मेजर्स अपनाएं. ऑलराइट, सो दैट इज व्हाट गवर्नमेंट हैज डन सिंस 2016 ऑल्सो. इट हैज embarked on projects such as the Uj Dam. The government has also proposed the Satluj Bias link. And the government has also announced a project called Shahpur Kandi project. These are some of the projects that you would see have been announced since 2016 on the eastern rivers, right? The Uj Dam, the Satluj Bias link, and the Shahpur Kandi project. These are all projects which are aimed at ensuring that India utilizes the maximum of its share on the eastern rivers. So हम अपना पानी बह के पाकिस्तान में नहीं जाने देंगे का ये ऑप्शन है. आप पानी रोक नहीं सकते, आप यूटिलाइज कर सकते हैं जितना ज्यादा पॉसिबल हो. राइट, देन द अदर ऑब्वियस ऑप्शन इज एक्सपेडाइट the implementation, expedite the implementation of announced projects on western rivers. For example, एक example है हमारे पास, the Kishan Ganga project. So Kishan Ganga is a tributary of Chenab. All right, on that India had proposed a project, hydropower project. Pakistan raised an objection, question hua, then it became a difference, neutral expert was appointed, he gave the opinion in favor of India, and after that Pakistan disputed the verdict of the neutral expert also. So on that India said that we don't agree, the issue has been resolved, and India then in 2016 inaugurated the Kishan Ganga project. So expedite all these projects which have been announced. वो तो हमारा domestic matter है ना, so we should expedite it. Sometimes the issue is with budget, regular budget allocation. Sometimes the issue is with security. So whatever we can do, we must do to implement the projects. And then revoking the treaty means changing the treaty is also possible. So Article 12 subclause 3, Article 12 subclause 3 of the treaty says that from time to time, if needed, the treaty may be changed by these two sides. So India must raise the demand for change in the treaty, changes in the treaty, by utilizing the provisions of Article 12 subclause 3 of the treaty, which says that from time to time the treaty may be changed if both the parties agree to it. So कुछ चीजें करनी नहीं होती हैं, कहनी होती हैं, है ना? अगर आपको हर चीज करनी पड़ जाए तो फिर आप पावरफुल नहीं रहेंगे. अगर आपके कहने से काम बने, तो basically what we are doing is we are signaling to Pakistan that we are dissatisfied with the treaty. We are not going to revoke it because हम responsible हैं, हम समझदार हैं, revoke करके फायदा बहुत कम है, लेकिन we are not happy, we want changes. Now what kind of changes, उस पे ambiguity बना के रखेंगे. All right, but we are saying that we need changes in the treaty. So using the provisions of the treaty, we may raise the demand of, India may raise the demand of the need for changes in the treaty. So that is basically, that becomes the complete picture. Should the treaty be revoked? You explain what's the rationale behind this argument. What are the reasons that can be attributed for the opinion that the treaty should be revoked? However, the revocation of the treaty may have symbolic significance, but it has certain limitations. Given this scenario, the limitations and the need to put pressure on Pakistan, there are three broad options available to India that India should exercise. One, Eastern rivers पे तो हमारा शेयर है, complete utilization by expediting projects, building projects, interstate coordination, center-state coordination, ऐसा होना चाहिए. On the western rivers, we may have limited rights, but we can implement certain projects. The treaty itself allows for it, so those kinds of projects should be implemented, expedited, just as we did with the Kishan Ganga project. And then another way of conveying our displeasure to Pakistan would be to say that we need changes in the treaty under the provisions of the treaty. Right? Article 12, subclause 3 of the treaty says that changes can be made. So let's think about making changes. That is what India can do in the context of this treaty. Right? Rather than revoking it. तो पूरी कहानी हो गई. अगर आपसे कोई पूछे कि treaty revoke करनी चाहिए क्या, तो आपके पास हाँ का भी कारण है, आपके पास ना का भी कारण है, और आपके पास एक कंक्लूजन भी है. कंक्लूजन किस बेसिस पे है? What is the basis of your conclusion? That you have weighed the yes and the no options and you are going for the most reasonable one, and then you are also trying to accommodate other concerns of putting pressure on Pakistan by providing a technically feasible way of doing so. Right? So basically अगर ऐसे सोच पाएंगे तो बेहतर रहेगा, and then it would all depend on practice. If you have any questions, please send them forward. Please bring the questions forward. अगर आपके पास कोई क्वेश्चन पूछना चाहते हैं पूछ लीजिए. Otherwise, we move towards what? We move towards what are called low-hanging fruits in India-Pakistan relations. All right? Low-hanging fruits in India-Pakistan relations is what we are going to look at. All right? ये term सुना है आपने low-hanging fruit? What is the meaning of low-hanging fruit? Which can be reason for war? Low-hanging fruit. कभी आपने कोई फल चुराया है किसी पेड़ से? आम के बागीचों में जाओगे, आम लगे होते हैं. आजकल और भी सारे फलों का सीजन है तो आप तोड़ने जाते हैं, तो सबसे नीचे का लगा हुआ फल जो सबसे आसानी से आप तोड़ सकते हैं. ऑल राइट. सो बेसिकली इफ यू हैव अ सेट ऑफ टास्क्स, if you have let's say 10 tasks, the most easily achievable of those tasks are called low hanging fruits, है ना. तो दो तरह के इश्यूज को लो हैंगिंग फ्रूट्स कहा जाता है इंडिया पाकिस्तान रिलेशंस में. देयर आर टू इश्यूज व्हिच आर कॉल्ड लो हैंगिंग फ्रूट्स. वन इज सियाचिन, अनदर इज सर क्रीक. सो लेट्स सिंपली लुक एट सम ऑफ द मैप्स. लास्ट चीज यही करते हैं क्लास में, मैप्स देख लेते हैं. दिस इज the map of Union Territories of Jammu and Kashmir and the Union Territory of Ladakh and Kargil. Kargil को अक्सर आप लोग भूल जाते हैं. All right. So this is the 2019 official map of Jammu and Kashmir. This tells you the complete territorial configuration of Jammu and Kashmir. So this is India's official position, that this is India's Jammu and Kashmir, now divided into two units, which is Union Territories of Jammu and Kashmir and Union Territories of Ladakh and Kargil. Now this is a map which tells you about what has happened territorially, de facto. So this is the ceasefire line as it existed in 1949. All right, the ceasefire line. The ceasefire line subsequently was converted into line of control in 1972, meaning de facto some parts of territory of Jammu and Kashmir are within physical control of India. Some parts of Jammu and Kashmir India does not physically control. So these parts, Gilgit-Baltistan, also called northern areas by Pakistan, and what it calls Azad Kashmir, India calls it Pakistan occupied Kashmir. All right, so these are the parts of territory which are with Pakistan, and then some parts of Jammu and Kashmir, Aksai Chin in the Ladakh region, is with the control of China, and some parts of Jammu and Kashmir are with China. They have been handed over by Pakistan to China. All right, which would be clearer in this particular map. Right, this is the Sarsgaon Valley. Sarsgaon Valley is around 5,000 square kilometers of territory, which was ceded by, handed over by Pakistan to China in 1963, which also India says is illegal because Pakistan has no right to do so. All right, so this is the territorial composition, and then comes the area of Siachen. Siachen is, if you see, west of Aksai Chin, east of Gilgit, north of Leh. All right, which is the administrative center of Ladakh. Right, so this is a glaciated area which is controlled by India. We will see a question which the UPSC had asked, right, on these kinds of issues. If any one of you is getting perturbed कि ये कैसे मैं करूंगा, मुझे कुछ समझ में नहीं आ रहा, तो just look at the questions that the UPSC is asking you. It is awareness based question. एक सिंपल मैप देख करके भी इसका आंसर कर सकते हैं आप. सियाचिन ग्लेशियर इज लोकेटेड टू. सियाचिन ग्लेशियर क्यों न्यूज में था 2020 में? बिकॉज द इंटायर टेरिटोरियल कॉन्फ़िगरेशन ऑफ जम्मू एंड कश्मीर वाज इन न्यूज. व्हाई? बिकॉज देयर वाज टेंशन बिटवीन इंडिया एंड चाइना टुवर्ड्स अक्साई चिन. सो नाउ पीपल वर लुकिंग एट पेट्रोलिंग पॉइंट, ये 1 कहाँ है, 2 कहाँ है, ये फिंगर किसके कंट्रोल में है. यूपीएससी ऐसे सवाल नहीं पूछती जिसका जवाब आपको नहीं देना होता. बट बेसिक फंडामेंटल क्या है, यू शुड बी अवेयर ऑफ द लोकेशन. सिंपल अवेयरनेस, मैप देख के भी एक स्टूडेंट को अवेयरनेस हो सकता है, उसको मिलिट्री कमांडर होने की जरूरत नहीं है ना. सो नाउ इधर यू नो इट डायरेक्टली और यू नो इट इनडायरेक्टली, राइट. ईस्ट ऑफ अक्साई चेन तो नहीं है, एलिमिनेट कर दिया आपने. ईस्ट ऑफ ले तो नहीं है, आपने देख लिया था. नॉर्थ ऑफ गिलगिट तो नहीं है, आपने देख लिया था मैप पे. अब नुब्रा मैंने आपको मैप में दिखाया नहीं, है ना. तो एक अप्रोच हो सकता है कि नुब्रा की लोकेशन मुझे नहीं दिखाई. दूसरा अप्रोच हो सकता है कि मुझे अगर 3 पता है तो ये तो अपने आप एलिमिनेशन से आंसर आ गया. ऑलराइट, दैट इट इज नॉर्थ ऑफ द नुब्रा वैली. इन एनी केस नुब्रा वैली इज वेरी पॉपुलर इन टर्म्स ऑफ बीइंग अ टूरिस्ट destination. But just look at the kind of questions that UPSC asks. This is awareness based question. This is not an expertise based question. ये मैं कह रहा हूं तो इसलिए सिंपली आप अपने मैप्स को देखते रहेंगे. भारत सरकार आपको पॉलिसी बनाने के लिए अभी नहीं बोल रही है. ऑलराइट, भारत सरकार पॉलिसी बनाने के लिए आपको नहीं बोल रही है. भारत सरकार बोल रही है कि हमें आप में से ऐसे लोग चाहिए जो जिनको ट्रेन किया जा सके. पीपल हु आर ट्रेनेबल, है ना. कुछ बेसिक है आपके अंदर, वो लेके आप आ जाइए. नाउ दिस इज सियाचिन ग्लेशियर. सो हियर इज अ स्मॉल बिट ऑफ स्टोरी. द सीज फायर लाइन और द लाइन ऑफ कंट्रोल ऑन द मैप एज negotiations took place were well demarcated till a point called NJ9842. मैप में एक पॉइंट है जिसको कहते हैं NJ9842. So till this point you have clear demarcation of line on the map, but there remained ambiguity beyond this point. So 1972 Simla agreement said that now the line of control should go northwards to the glaciers. Northwards to the glacier जाना चाहिए, ऐसा प्रोविजन है, बट मैप में उसको ड्रॉ नहीं किया गया. तो नॉर्थवर्ड्स टू द ग्लेशियर का क्या मतलब है? पाकिस्तान सेज नॉर्थवर्ड्स टू द ग्लेशियर शुड मीन अ स्ट्रेट लाइन टू द काराकोरम पास. काराकोरम पास तक जाना चाहिए नॉर्थवर्ड्स टू द ग्लेशियर का पाकिस्तान के लिए ये मतलब है. इंडियाज पोजीशन इज नॉर्थवर्ड्स टू द ग्लेशियर मींस कवरिंग द ग्लेशिएटेड एरिया एंड इन द माउंटेन्स द रिज लाइन इज वेयर यू कैन डिसाइड द डिमार्केशन. सो इंडिया मेंटेन्स कंट्रोल ओवर अ रिज कॉल्ड द साल्टोरो रिज. नाम सुना है आपने, साल्टोरो रिज. सो ये जब आने लगे तो आपको याद रखना चाहिए. सो इंडिया मेंटेन्स कंट्रोल ओवर द साल्टोरो रिज एंड देयर बाय कंट्रोल्स एक्सेस टू द सियाचिन ग्लेशियर रीजन. ऑलराइट, सो इनिशियली this region was an ignored region. Why? Because it's glaciated, it's remote geographically, there is no population here, all right, there is no vegetation here, so deploying military was a difficult proposition. So this was a remote area, nature took care of it. 1960s 70s there are certain incidences which happen which basically changes India's position. India realizes that Western tourists, Germans, Americans, go for excursion into the areas occupied by Pakistan. K2 इसी एरिया में है, all right. So उनको बड़ा शौक होता है K2 को क्लाइम करने का. So Pakistan has been issuing excursion permits to Western tourists into this region. Some Western maps, कुछ tourist maps, they had started showing this region to be a part of Pakistan. Second thing. And thirdly, there was some intelligence input that Pakistan is planning some action in the mountains. Some stories say that, in London, Indian agents by coincidence noticed that Pakistan is buying high altitude equipments. है ना, हाई ऑल्टीट्यूड गियर खरीद रहे हैं पाकिस्तान वाले. एक ही दुकान में चले गए दोनों, तो इंडिया को भी पता चल गया. सो देन इंडिया ऑल्सो डिसाइडेड टू माउंट इट्स ओन एक्सपेडिशन, राइट. सो फर्स्ट इट कंडक्टेड अ सर्वे एंड देन इन 1984 13th April 1984, India mounted its own military operation called the Operation Meghdoot. All right, so Operation Meghdoot in 1984 is when India establishes its presence over the Saltoro Ridge. Saltoro Ridge. So in many documents, this particular part of the line is called AGPL. AGPL, Actual Ground Position Line. ये साल्टोरो रिज के ऊपर इंडिया जो अपनी पोजीशन मेंटेन करता है, इसको कई बार क्या कहा जाता है? AGPL. सो LOC है, NJ 9842 तक तो क्लियर था. उसके बाद नॉर्थवर्ड टू द ग्लेशियर, पाकिस्तान से स्ट्रेट लाइन टू कराकोरम पास. इंडियाज पोजीशन इज on the Saltoro Ridge, right? AGPL. Now, few things that you should remember. Why is Siachen important? So, most important factor that behind the salience of Siachen is its location. All right? It's strategically located. For India, number one, India maintains control over heights, over the Saltoro Ridge. Pakistan also responded in 1984, but Pakistan maintains a presence on the lower reaches. So India is now in a militarily advantageous position on top. All right, और ये तो बहुत आम बात हो गई है कि भाई militarily अगर आप ऊंचाई पे हो तो आप फायदे की पोजीशन पे हो. So that is one. Militarily India occupies a higher ground on the Saltoro Ridge. But secondly, and more importantly, now, this is India's only access to the Saksgam Valley that Pakistan has ceded to China. अगर यहां पे हमारा कंट्रोल नहीं हो तो इसका मतलब क्या है कि हम जम्मू एंड कश्मीर के उस पार्ट से जो कि पाकिस्तान ने चाइना को दे दिया उससे कट ऑफ हो जाएंगे. सो द सियाचिन ग्लेशियर इज इंडियाज लिंक विथ द साक्सगाम वैली ceded by Pakistan to China. So that's why it is strategically all the more important. By maintaining a control over this region, India is basically putting a wedge between China and Pakistan. India बीच में आ गया, दोनों की दोस्ती पूरी नहीं होने दी, है ना? So India has not been completely cut off from the Saksgam Valley, right? And thirdly, a minor point, this is among the most densely glaciated areas in the world. Some estimates call it the third pole of the world. So because of fresh water resources, glaciers present in this area, this region is important. But more importantly, it is location. One, India maintaining presence on the higher reaches of Saltoro Ridge is militarily advantageous. Two, Siachen Glacier and maintaining control over it provides India access to the Saksgam Valley, which was illegally ceded by Pakistan to China. And three, this is a glaciated region, so it is important in terms of its fresh water resources. So thereby India maintains control over this particular region, right? तो अभी इतना ही विचार विमर्श पे रोकते हैं इसको. In the next class what we will be doing, we will be continuing onwards. We will be continuing from Siachen to Sir Creek, and then other issues with India and Pakistan, and then after that we'll go to Afghanistan. All right, India, Pakistan complete करेंगे, अफगानिस्तान की तरफ जाएंगे. If you have any questions, you are more than welcome. Otherwise, in an organized fashion, please go wherever you want to go. Be safe, be healthy, come back to the class.